A desperate blonde prince begs a powerful red-haired witch to save his life. She completely falls for him, becoming his ultimate bodyguard and weapon. She literally hands him the kingdom, placing the throne right in his lap. But how does he repay her? By driving a sword straight through her chest. He coldly claims he's just following her advice to eliminate anything that bothers him, acting like a total snake. The Great Witch dies at the hands of the only human she ever trusted. Thankfully, her magical core survives. She plans to just chill in the spirit realm for 10 years and respawn. Instead, she instantly wakes up as a literal newborn baby in the arms of two panicking maids. The servants start freaking out because the newborn isn't making a single sound. One of them flips her over to smack her bottom, completely shattering the former witch's dignity. She fumes in silence, absolutely mortified by the disrespect. The maids worry that if she doesn't cry, the cruel king will deem her useless and throw her away like trash. They prepare to smack her again, and she mentally screams at the impending humiliation. To save her own skin, she swallows her pride and forces out the fakest, loudest baby wail ever. The maids sigh in relief, totally buying the act. But when a maid dares to gently pat her stomach, the former witch rages on the inside. Surprisingly, the maids look down at her with deep sorrow, pleading for the little princess to survive. She lies there confused, wondering why her past self had to die in the first place. She realizes she had no idea what kind of crazy timeline she was setting up back then. Blinking her massive baby eyes, she questions how it all went so wrong. Suddenly, her gaze hardens as the painful memories flood back. It was all because that backstabbing royal completely played her. Back in the day, Lucas was just a hated youngest prince on the run from his brother. Ambushed and bleeding out in the desert, he barely survived an assassination attempt. He dragged his battered body into her mountains and threw himself at her mercy. And like an absolute fool, the witch was instantly captivated. She felt that classic human emotion of love at first sight and went all in to help him. She used all her overwhelming power to crown him king. But on the day he was supposed to propose, there was no ring in sight. Instead, he brutally pierced her heart with his blade. Snapping back to reality, the baby witch wiggles her tiny hands in the air. She realizes that skipping the 10-year wait and hijacking a baby's body is actually a massive cheat code. With a devious grin, she plots a speedrun for her revenge. She mentally crushes a voodoo doll of Luca's, promising to absolutely wreck him. Just then, her sweet maid leans over the crib to check on her. The maid asks if she needs a diaper change, and the baby throws a mental tantrum at the lack of boundaries. She proudly declares internally that she's a magnificent witch, not some helpless infant. But the maid's tone shifts, wishing for the princess to remain completely ordinary and invisible. She hopes no one ever finds out the baby exists just so she can live a long life. The baby stares up, completely caught off guard by the grim warning. She wonders what kind of messed up kingdom she just got reincarnated into. The maid snaps out of it and runs to get food, while the baby protests eating mushy garbage. Finally alone, she decides to test out her new vessel's mana reserves. As the magic sparks, her tiny eyes widen in pure shock. This tiny human body is already at a level 5 mana capacity, making her an absolute prodigy. Drunk on her op stats, the baby playfully considers conquering the entire world. But reality hits hard when the maid returns and starts changing her diaper. The maid praises her for being such a mature, quiet baby. Meanwhile, the former Great Witch covers her face, wishing the ground would swallow her whole from the embarrassment. The maid scoops her up for a walk, warning that they must enjoy the outdoors now before things get dangerous. The baby stares up at the smiling maid, completely lost in thought. As they pass a mirror, she wonders which Imperial family she actually belongs to and who would even dare to harm a newborn. The maid explains they are in the Dandelion Palace, a safe zone where all royal babies stay until they turn 5. After that, she'll have to choose a sword and earn her own palace, but the maid assures her that's years away. The baby sighs, relieved she gets a solid 5 years of peace. But then she suddenly throws a tantrum, mentally demanding the maid stop talking in riddles and give her the actual lore drops. The maid gets confused by the sudden fuss, but then heavy footsteps approach the room. She freezes mid-sentence, sensing a massive presence behind her. She immediately bows in absolute respect, greeting His Majesty. The baby glances over, totally caught off guard by the Emperor's sudden arrival. A tall man with long white hair walks in, glowing like a literal raid boss. Staring at his ridiculously handsome face, she feels a strange sense of déjà vu. She squints hard, trying to figure out where she's seen this guy before. Meanwhile, the Emperor glares down at her, giving off an insane aura that feels exactly like a wild dragon. He coldly observes her striking white hair and red eyes. The maid nervously stutters that the baby inherited his bold colors, comparing her to Yesikina. The baby's mind completely short-circuits, Yesikina was the northern dragon she used to beef with in her past life. She sweats bullets, wondering why the maid is casually bringing up that ancient, terrifying lizard. Hearing the word dragon, the emperor reaches a hand out toward the baby. Without warning, he violently pinches her cheek, making her shriek in pain. She bursts into real tears, mentally cursing this absolute menace for bullying an infant. Refusing to be a victim, she completely snaps and bites down hard on his finger. She aggressively chews on him before spitting it out, while the maid absolutely panics in the background. The emperor stares at his hand in silence as the maid begs for mercy, terrified for the baby's life. But instead of getting mad, he looks amused that this tiny infant chose violence over crying. Smirking, he summons a glowing orb and decides she's already strong enough to participate in the sword selection. The maid tries to protest, reminding him the baby hasn't even had her first birthday yet. He brushes her off, claiming the kid can handle it, while the baby mentally screams that this dude is completely unhinged. He even lies and says the baby likes the idea, while she fiercely glares at him with puffed cheeks. He officially names her Raeliana, claiming she bites like a fierce lioness. He dramatically turns around, warning that he'll be watching to see if she becomes a true apex predator or just a crude beast. With a final glance, he tells her to meet his expectations, leaving Raeliana to aggressively pout in the maid's arms. He walks away, leaving a heavy tension in the room. The maid sighs in massive relief, muttering about how strange and intense he is. But suddenly, Raeliana's eyes lock onto his sword scabbard and something clicks. She squints, knowing for a fact she's seen that exact weapon before. She remembers it vividly, a hilt made from a fairy queen's wings and a scabbard carved from a black dragon, both slain by a single human. Her heart drops into her stomach as the horrifying realization hits her. She clutches her tiny fists, praying to the heavens that it's just a coincidence. The maid notices her trembling and apologizes, thinking the baby is just traumatized from the pinch. She tears up, lamenting that she can't stop tomorrow's brutal sword selection due to the kingdom's strict laws. Carrying her away, the maid realizes the tiny princess is now officially dragged into a deadly fight for the throne. Raeliana processes the words sword selection and inheritance fight as they walk down the hall. A cold sweat breaks out across her face as full-blown panic sets in. She realizes there's only one twisted empire in the world that makes its heirs fight to the death over swords. And there's only one emperor with dragon-like strength, striking white hair and piercing blue eyes. Connecting the dots, she realizes her full name is Raeliana von Hassis, and she is absolutely cooked. The maid gently tells her to remember everything she says to survive. But Raeliana is too busy having a mental breakdown, realizing she just reincarnated as the daughter of the exact same traitor who murdered her in her past life. Now she's trapped inside the grand but terrifying Hassis Empire, forced to survive her worst enemy all over again. Lord Drop Time, the Emperor possesses the blood of a dragon, making him an absolute powerhouse in this world. Raeliana remembers him perfectly as the jerk she violently threw down within her past life. Over 20 years ago, a group of humans tried trespassing through her sacred mountain range. Naturally, as a fierce witch protecting her turf, she absolutely wrecked their carriage. But it turns out those merchants belonged to the continent's strongest empire and were carrying a priceless national treasure. And what happened next? The crazy emperor literally came sprinting across the land just to slice her head off. To survive, she had to swallow her pride and shapeshift into a literal rat, scurrying away for her life. Ever since that day, she couldn't even sleep peacefully if she was facing the direction of his empire. Realizing she just got reborn as this monster's daughter makes her scream internally, startling the poor maid. Completely dead inside, the baby lies in bed, seriously debating if she should just throw this whole life away. She knows that if that emperor ever finds out who she really is, he'll obliterate her on the spot. But she quickly shakes it off, realizing her new level 5 mana and royal bloodline are just way too op to abandon. Plus, she remembers the brutal motto of the Hassis Empire, only the strongest survive. Rumor has it the previous emperor had 38 children. And instead of raising them properly, he threw them into a massive, bloody battle royale. The last kid standing claimed the throne and ruled the entire continent. Yup, her current dad is the absolute psycho who flat-out murdered his 37 siblings to wear the crown. He built a kingdom where you kill or get killed, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. Thinking about it, a devious little smirk creeps across her baby face. She realizes this brutal ecosystem is actually the perfect playground for a legendary witch. The maid notices her good mood, totally unaware that the baby is plotting world domination since she's safely protected until age 5. Still, she can't believe that Emperor Jerk is already putting a sword selection in front of her. She scoffs at his ridiculous expectations for an infant, but admits it feels pretty good being acknowledged by the guy who almost killed her. With fire in her eyes, Raeliana makes her ultimate decision. She is going to seize the throne and become the emperor. She starts giggling like a tiny supervillain, leaving the maid completely confused. Soon, the maid carries her into a massive hall packed to the brim with elite candidates. Staring at the crowd, Riona vows to become the ultimate monarch. And once she has the power, she'll absolutely crush the Carol kingdom and that backstabbing traitor Lucas. Pointing her tiny finger at the massive lineup, she locks onto her single choice. A green-haired knight smiles confidently, thinking the rumors of her being a genius must be true. After all, the emperor had previously snubbed his older, incredibly talented royal siblings. So the knight fully expects this one-year-old prodigy to recognize his insane strength. Plus, he's secretly melting inside because he thinks she is just too cute. This guy isn't a joke, either. He's the Knight of Devastation who single-handedly wiped out 5 ogre armies in half a day. But Riona remembers him perfectly from her past life. Back then, this arrogant kid tried climbing her mountains, so she beat him like a literal drum. Now he just stands there smiling foolishly at her. She rolls her eyes and completely ignores him. She has a much better meat shield in mind right now. Instead, she points straight at a gloomy woman named Cage Ardeppas. Cage is a terrifying necromancer who can infinitely summon undead soldiers, making her a nearly invincible bodyguard. In her past life, Riona always wanted to duel her, but their paths never crossed. Now she officially claims this legendary necromancer as her personal sword. But there's just one weird problem: Cage refuses to look at her. Riona smiles happily, assuming everything is going exactly to plan. She reaches out to her new bodyguard, ready to claim her anti-assassination insurance. But Cage actually flinches and steps back, leaving the baby totally offended. Riona tries reaching for her again, but the dark mage slowly shuffles away like she's terrified. The deadly necromancer nervously glances away, sweating as she silently panics over how to handle a tiny infant. Furious that her new bodyguard is backing away, Riona cries out, demanding Cage to come closer. She wipes her face, getting even angrier because the room is uncomfortably hot and making her sweat. Playing the victim card perfectly, she wails that it hurts, reminding everyone she's just a weak 1-year-old. Cage stares down at her with a deadly serious expression, quietly cursing the infant's fragile body. But on the inside, Riona is throwing a mental fit, promising to completely wreck them all once she grows up. Hearing the fuss, her loyal maid Lynn rushes over, frantically asking Cage what's wrong. Riona's eyes sparkle, realizing Lynn is the only one in this cursed palace who actually gets her. Cage awkwardly steps back, promising to stop calling the maid useless. Lynn looks completely stressed, terrified that the tiny princess is in actual pain. Glancing around nervously, Cage suggests it would be best for them to let go of the baby's hand. Suddenly, Riona blinks in confusion as an unfamiliar old man steps into her line of sight. Sweating nervously, the man introduces himself as Healer Verla. Riona mentally questions why a healer was randomly spawned into her room. Verla notes the child is quiet but admits he was dragged here to check on her condition. He asks for permission to do a checkup and Lynn eagerly nods. Riona glares at her maid, internally screaming that no one is asking for her opinion. As Verla grabs her tiny hands and uses his magic, Riona assumes he's just a nobody and regrets ever reincarnating. Lynn anxiously asks the healer what he's sensing. Verla's eyes go wide, and he shouts in pure shock that the baby's mana is completely overflowing. Riona presses her cheeks in surprise, wondering why he's freaking out when she feels perfectly fine. The healer firmly declares that this tiny body is somehow outputting level 5 mana. Riona is actually impressed, realizing this old man isn't a total fraud after all. But then Verla ruins it by gravely assuming someone maliciously infused the mana into her, warning that her life is in danger. Lynn completely panics, connecting the dots that this is why the princess was sweating earlier. Riona mentally sighs, knowing she's just a fire witch. Lynn remembers the baby shaking earlier, while Riona awkwardly admits to herself she was literally just vibrating with excitement over becoming emperor. Verla sympathetically assumes she must have been in horrendous pain, amazed she didn't even cry. Lynn bursts into tears, calling the princess deeply dignified for just laughing through the pain, while Riona mentally facepalms. They wildly guess that she received a blessing from the dragon Yesikina, making Riona internally rage that she doesn't need that senile lizard's help. Verla shouts for a doctor, leaving the baby witch to suffer through their massive misunderstanding. Sometime later, the chaos settles as Verla admits the mana isn't actually harming her and they were just being too hasty. He assures Lynn that the tiny princess is completely stable for now. He politely takes his leave, leaving Riona completely passed out in her crib. Cage watches the sleeping baby, remembering the dark vow the emperor forced upon her. She gently pokes Riona's cheek, speaking in broken sentences as she compares the brave little bunny to a future apex predator. Riona wakes up, instantly annoyed that Cage is staring at her like a weirdo again, while Lin worries about her safety after the fake mana scare. Riona internally flexes, knowing her maid really has absolutely nothing to worry about. After all, she has a legendary necromancer as a bodyguard, even if Cage awkwardly distances herself every time Riona gets close. Lin sighs, telling the baby it's going to be a while before her new palace is organized. She cheerfully offers Riona a rattle or a binky to keep her entertained. Riona violently squirms, throwing a massive tantrum because a great witch absolutely does not play with baby toys. Cage gets flustered and apologizes for no reason, while Lin frantically tries to calm the flailing infant. Digging through a storage box, Lin finally pulls out a dusty, worn-out rabbit doll that looks like garbage. But Riona instantly stops crying, squinting at the toy as she realizes this is no ordinary stuffed animal. Cage asks about it in her broken speech, and Lin explains the toy belonged to Riona's late mother. Her mom had cherished the doll ever since she was a little girl in the Aslan Grand Duchy. She even brought it with her when she married into the Ruthless Imperial family, making Riona happily chew on its ear. Lin sniffles, deeply moved that the baby loves it, while Cage silently observes that the princess is already built different. Lin worries about the baby's current weakness, but is suddenly jump-scared when Cage bluntly barks at the baby to come here. Riona yawns, completely unfazed, wondering why her maid is so terrified of someone who speaks like a literal caveman. Finally making up her mind, Lin apologizes to the princess and carries her down the hall, determined to fulfill her mother's dying wish. Lin holds Riona tightly, offering to beg the emperor for a different palace if she hates this one. Riona stares blankly, wondering why her maid is acting so horrified over a simple building. But as they approach the Black Rose Palace, the dark and gloomy exterior tells her everything she needs to know. The place looks completely haunted, making Riona wonder if her late mother was actually a total weirdo for requesting this dump as her dying wish. Suddenly, she notices something far more terrifying. The entire palace is completely engulfed in the exact same dark mana as her mysterious rabbit doll. Before she can react, Cage suddenly grabs them both and swiftly sweeps them forward. As they get closer to the gates, the dark energy gets ridiculously thick, hinting that something extremely dangerous is hidden inside. Riona clutches her doll, knowing that if she can sense the crazy mana, her new bodyguard definitely can too. But surprisingly, Cage casually strolls forward looking completely unbothered. Riona realizes the necromancer is simply built different. She easily detects the danger but literally could not care less. Suddenly, the wind whips around them, heavy with aggressive magical power. A blonde boy appears out of nowhere, arrogantly demanding to know if this tiny infant is actually trying to fight him for the throne. He stammers in confusion as the baby mutters back in broken, high-pitched gibberish. Internally, Riona is fuming, swearing she'd absolutely wreck this brat with a single blow if she were just a little older. But before things escalate, the boy leans in, noticing her stuffed toy. Meanwhile, a quick flashback reveals the green-haired knight, Harriet, aggressively slamming his hands on the emperor's desk a few days prior. He confronts the emperor, trying to act tough despite sweating bullets under the ruler's icy glare. Harriet demands answers about the rumors of Princess Riona nearly dying from a level 5 mana overflow. The emperor just smirks, praising Cage for her swift reaction and calling the necromancer a reliable asset. Disgusted by the emperor's smile, Harriet snaps, furious that the ruler doesn't even care that his daughter almost kicked the bucket. He practically begs the emperor to admit whether this near-death experience was his doing. The emperor coldly states he has no reason to kill his own kids, explaining that since Riona chose her bodyguard, she is now fair game for the other competitive royals. Harriet throws his hands up in absolute disbelief, shocked that the emperor refuses to protect his own flesh and blood. He yells that in a family full of bloodthirsty tyrants, Riona is the only cute and lovely one, completely melting over her existence. Unfazed, the emperor casually drops the bomb that he assigned Riona to the Black Rose Palace. Harriet absolutely loses his mind, reminding him that the palace is a literal slaughterhouse where the previous first prince massacred his siblings. He yells that the place is still stained with blood and completely exposed to assassins. The emperor icily replies that if she dies, it's simply her fate, leaving Harriet completely disgusted by his cruelty. The emperor twitches in annoyance, seriously questioning why he keeps such an emotional guy like Harriet on his payroll. Dramatically sniffling, Harriet declares he will protect the princess himself and storms out of the room like a hero. As the knight leaves, the emperor taps his desk, highly amused that a literal 1-year-old managed to win over both Cage and Harriet. Grinning like a menace, he decides he needs to go see this interesting little princess for himself. Cutting back to the spooky palace, the blonde royal steps toward Riona, coldly declaring that he's going to kill her. But the moment he actually looks down at his target, he completely freezes. He stares at the tiny, squishy infant holding her plushie and is instantly hit by her overwhelming cuteness. Riona squeaks at him, and his brain completely short-circuits as he compares her to a fluffy little rabbit. He clutches his chest, feeling his heart literally throb from the sheer adorableness. He mentally curses Harriet for not warning him that she was this dangerously cute. Suddenly, a chilling voice calls out to His Highness. Cage steps out from the shadows like a boss, hiding the maid and baby behind her, demanding to know why he's there. The young prince tries to act tough, puffing his chest and claiming he doesn't need a reason to walk around his own home. Cage hits him with a deadpan stare, bluntly calling him out for threatening the princess. The boy immediately plays dumb, sweating as he asks who exactly threatened her. When Cage points out that he just did, the prince fully gasps, frantically denying it. Cage glares at him, mentally roasting the young royal for being so incredibly shameless. Desperate to change the subject, the boy points a shaking finger at Riona's dusty rabbit doll. He yells at them for letting a royal hold such a gross, dirty toy and orders them to throw it out immediately. Internally, he's totally daydreaming about buying her a luxury teddy bear just to see her smile at him. He completely zones out, grinning like an absolute fool while Cage just awkwardly watches him lose his mind. Lin corrects the blonde prince, gently explaining that the battered doll actually belonged to Riona's late mother. Prince Nickel looks completely caught off guard, pointing out that she's not even a year old yet. He wonders how an infant could possibly understand the sentimental value of a dead parent's toy. Internally, he absolutely loses his mind, shouting that it's unfair for someone so young and cute to have such a tragically sad backstory. Cage gives a firm nod, bluntly agreeing with his dramatic thoughts. Embarrassed that his soft side is showing, Nickel angrily barks at the necromancer to shut up. Trying to salvage his pride, he dramatically spins around and starts striding toward the exit. He glances back, telling his baby sister not to live a pitiful life anymore. Puffing his chest out, he brags that he's granting her the sun god's blessing, though he claims it's probably too flattering for her. Riona just stares at him like he's crazy, totally confused by the random sun god comment. Lin whispers an explanation, revealing that the arrogant boy is actually Prince Nickel, her older brother who wields divine solar powers. Walking away, Nickel touches his blushing face, secretly wondering why babies are so dangerously cute when he definitely wasn't. He completely fails at being a tough guy, muttering that he'll definitely be coming back. Acting like he owns the place, he orders them to leave the main doors open for his next visit. The second he's gone, Cage hits him with a deadpan stare and bluntly declares the door must stay closed. Lin instantly agrees, absolutely not wanting that dramatic kid coming back anytime soon. Back in the crib, Riona realizes her brother gave her his magical blessing just so she could grow up faster. She admits it's a solid buff, but she still crosses her arms, annoyed by his arrogant attitude. Staring out at the gloomy palace, she just hopes no more annoying humans show up to ruin her peace. Thankfully, time absolutely flies by when you're a newborn. 3 whole years pass in a flash, and Riona is now a much bigger, fully conscious toddler. She throws her hands up in pure triumph, thrilled that she can finally walk, talk, and move freely instead of being trapped in a crib like a potato. She's practically crying tears of joy over her newfound mobility. She sighs, still kind of salty that a legendary witch had to start from level 1 like this. But she smiles proudly, satisfied with how much she's leveled up now that she's 3. Lin walks in with a bright smile, happily greeting the little princess. Riona beams back, her adorable energy completely lighting up the room. The sweet maid offers to quickly clean her up and bring over a delicious breakfast. Riona eagerly agrees, politely telling her to hurry up because she's starving. But then she notices Lin just staring at her in a total daze. Blushing, Lin admits she was just caught off guard by how incredibly cute Her Highness is today. Riona puffs out her chest, smugly replying that of course she knows she's adorable. Internally, she completely credits her crazy emperor dad for passing down his god-tier genetics. She huffs though, knowing this tiny body is still nothing compared to her majestic witch days. Lin playfully calls her cute highness as she gently washes the toddler's face. Riona flashes a billion-dollar smile, totally playing the part of an innocent angel. She notes that Lin hasn't changed at all and is still just as fiercely loyal and affectionate. But a dark thought creeps into her mind, should she actually trust this maid? Remembering how her old lover literally stabbed her in the back, she coldly decides humans will always betray you eventually. For now, she decides to just fake a sweet smile and use her cute 3-year-old privilege to stay safe. Lin gently asks if she slept well and had any good dreams. Putting on her best baby voice, Riona chirps that she had a super nice dream. Lin leans in, curious to hear the adorable details. Riona brightly explains that tons of people appeared and then they all died. Lin completely freezes, her face dropping into sheer horror as the vibe suddenly dies. Trying to fix it, Riona cheerfully adds that she killed them all herself so she didn't die. Lin covers her mouth, looking absolutely traumatized by the toddler's unhinged murder dream. Riona starts sweating, totally lost on human logic. Isn't surviving a bloodbath a good thing? Before Lin can recover from the shock, she glances toward the balcony and gasps. Cage is standing right outside the glass, motioning for the maid to step out for a quick, serious talk. Cage stammers, completely lost for words at the baby's terrifying statement. Lin hurriedly asks the necromancer to step outside for a private chat. Riona blinks in confusion, wondering why her maid is suddenly acting so embarrassed. As the door shuts, she realizes they think she won't be able to hear them from out there. But since she's a 3-year-old who can already perfectly control her mana, eavesdropping is an absolute breeze. Outside, Lin angrily scolds Cage, demanding she be more careful with her words around the toddler. She specifically grills the necromancer about literally summoning the undead right in front of the princess. The maid furiously argues that a child her age should only be seeing beautiful things, not actual nightmares. Looking incredibly gloomy, Cage mutters that the scary sights must be why the poor princess is having such gruesome dreams. Listening in, Riona tilts her head, genuinely baffled that they consider a few weak skeletons scary. To her, the only thing truly terrifying in this world is the Emperor himself. Come to think of it, she hasn't seen her crazy dad in 3 whole years, and Lin never even brings him up. This sparks her curiosity, knowing that if he was a monster back then, he must be even more ridiculously op now. But she quickly refocuses on her ultimate goal, becoming the Emperor, which means eventually wiping out all her royal siblings. And according to their brutal traditions, she might even have to take out her dad, too. She seriously wonders if she has what it takes to actually beat him. Meanwhile, Lin fiercely warns Cage that if she summons another zombie, there will be hell to pay. Cage sulks like a scolded puppy, meekly agreeing to behave. Just as Lin turns to head back inside, she gasps in shock. She slaps her own cheeks, snapping out of her panic to get back to her duties. She remembers she still needs to grab the princess's breakfast, while Cage quietly chimes in that she's hungry too. They decide to head to the kitchen together, their footsteps echoing down the hall. Now, usually, leaving a royal completely unguarded is practically begging for an assassination. But thanks to Cage's elite dark magic, a powerful barrier surrounds Riona's room. Suddenly, Riona's sharp red eyes lock onto the balcony window. A masked assassin is lurking right outside the glass, completely blocked from entering by the magical shield. Playing the part of a helpless toddler, Riona lets out a fake, high-pitched whine. The assassin glares at the door, frustrated that he finally caught her unguarded but still can't break through. But to his absolute shock, the tiny princess casually pushes the door open and waddles right out onto the balcony. The assassin smirks behind his mask, thinking this foolish kid just handed him a free kill. Stepping out from the bushes, he confidently tells her that she's just as cute as the rumors say. Riona grips the railing, putting on an award-winning performance of a terrified baby. With wide, innocent eyes, she asks if he's super strong. The hitman chuckles, bragging that he's so fast he can disappear in the blink of an eye. Instantly dropping the act, Riona flashes a wicked smile and declares she won't hold back either. The assassin's brain lags for a second before Riona places her tiny hand on the railing, unleashing a massive magic crest. Instantly, a wave of frost shoots out, completely freezing the assassin from the waist down. Riona sighs internally, annoyed that if she had her full witch powers, she would have just totally obliterated him. Deciding to make do with what she has, she summons a crackling blast of purple lightning right into his chest. The assassin screams as he gets absolutely fried by the electric shock. He slumps over groaning, while Riona smiles brightly, admitting it's a bit of an overkill to use third-tier magic on a scrub, but she's just enjoying the target practice. Barely conscious, the hitman looks up in confusion, asking if the tiny princess is actually trying to spare his life. Riona coldly observes him, reflecting on how ridiculously selfish humans are. They only submit when someone completely overpowers them. Flashing a sinister smile, she cheerfully tells him she just hates letting her enemies die too easily. After dealing with the trash, Riona heads back inside and yawns, suddenly feeling super lethargic from the warm sun. She rubs her cheeks against the insanely soft velvet sofa, sinking into the cushions. She giggles happily, absolutely loving the luxurious fluffiness of royal life. She knows she shouldn't be slacking off, but with Cage standing guard nearby, she can't help but roll around like a lazy cat. Still, she pouts, realizing she can't actually grind her mana levels with an audience watching her every move. Flashing a sharp glare, she seriously debates if she should just drop the act and reveal that she's actually a ridiculously overpowered mage. Riona quickly reconsiders, deciding it's best to keep her level 3 magic a secret for now. If word gets out that she's a literal toddler prodigy, it would definitely attract even more dangerous assassins. Worse, the rumors might reach her backstabbing ex Lucas, putting that paranoid fool on high alert. Clenching her tiny fist, she vows to hide her power until she can perfectly control it and completely take over the royal palace. But for now, she decides to just chill on the soft velvet sofa and play the part of a lazy 3-year-old. She lets out a massive yawn, feeling the warmth of the sun pulling her into a nap. Her eyes flutter shut as she peacefully drifts off to sleep. But her peace is instantly shattered when Prince Nickel bursts through the doors, happily shouting for his bunny. Riona glares at him, deeply annoyed that this kid literally never leaves her alone. Nickel gets sulky, telling her she should properly greet her amazing older brother. She gives him the most deadpan look ever, hitting him with a super sarcastic greeting. For the past 3 years, the 10-year-old prince has obsessively visited her every single day, treating her like his personal pet. Riona sighs, genuinely baffled as to why a royal fighting in a deadly inheritance war wastes so much time on her. She naturally assumes he's just coming over to bully her. But Nickel completely misreads her annoyance, melting over how cute her grumpy expression is. He reaches out and Riona braces herself, knowing he's definitely going for the cheek pinch. She reluctantly accepts her fate, reminding herself she has to play the part of a weak toddler. But before he can make contact, Cage suddenly steps in, blankly ordering the prince to wash his hands. Nickel snaps back, complaining that he already washed up on the way over. Ignoring the bodyguard, he happily pinches Riona's squishy cheek, totally obsessed with how soft she is. Cage glares at him, bluntly warning him that he's hurting her, but he claims he's being gentle. He smugly brags that even if she gets hurt, he can easily heal her since he wields the sun god's power. Flashing a bright grin, he expects Riona to be totally amazed by his flex. Instead, she mentally scoffs, absolutely refusing to believe the words of an evil human. Without hesitating, she furiously smacks his hand away. Nickel blinks in shock, confused as to why she's suddenly rejecting him. Riona scolds him, pointing out that he always comes uninvited and does absolutely nothing useful. Nickel looks confused for a second before his face softens. He simply smiles and admits he keeps coming over because he genuinely likes her. Hearing this, Cage immediately steps forward and bluntly declares that she loves the princess. Nickel gets super defensive, yelling that he loves Riona too. The two of them start petty bickering over who loves the toddler more, with Cage coldly claiming she wins. Watching them argue over her, a dark memory suddenly surfaces in Riona's mind. Over 300 years ago, back when she was just a human child, a man came looking for her. He was a wandering alchemist named Jin, and he found her living alone as a starving street orphan fated to die. Seeing her condition, he gently offered her bread and milk, becoming the first adult to ever show her kindness. By the time she was 5, she completely relied on him. When he realized she didn't have a name, he offered to give her one. He thought for a moment before looking down at her and calling her Alina. He smiled warmly, telling her the name suited her since she was small but wouldn't crumble easily. Eating the food he gave her, her empty heart filled with a deep sense of peace and warmth. Jin patted her head and told her that feeling was love. Believing his sweet words, she followed him back to his tower. But she had absolutely no idea what kind of living nightmare was waiting for her inside. The tower was a literal torture chamber, filled with terrified kids locked in cages, begging the doctor to save them. Jin cold-heartedly stared at a suffering child, annoyed that they weren't dead yet. He ordered his assistant to throw out the trash, completely discarding the kids who couldn't handle his experiments. Then he knelt in front of little Alina, gently telling her to come with him for the next trial. She knew she should have run away, but the terrified little girl was completely paralyzed by fear. Jin flashed a psychotic smile, claiming his gruesome experiments would turn them into the only witches in the world. Back in the present memory, an older Alina sits in the rain surrounded by blood and shattered glass, completely broken by his fake love. Realizing humans are nothing but liars, she staggers away into the stormy night, leaving her humanity behind. Cage is absolutely speechless, totally flinching at Riona's dark and serious vibes. Lin leans in and whispers the tragic lore to Prince Nickel. Riona's mom is dead and the baby only has her maid left in this world. Riona rubs her forehead, super annoyed by all the secretive whispering going on right in front of her. Suddenly, Nickel gently grabs her face, looking dead serious. Both Nickel and Cage vow their absolute love for her, but Riona coldly rejects it in her mind, refusing to ever trust a human's words again. Nickel frantically checks if she's hurt, admitting the whole assassin situation was genuinely scary. Even the usually stoic Cage steps up, anxiously asking if the tiny princess is okay. Riona is totally caught off guard. For the first time ever, people are genuinely protecting her and she didn't even sense their mana coming. But instead of feeling grateful, she gets completely fired up, vowing to grind her skills and become ridiculously stronger than all of them combined. Right on cue, Harriet strolls into the room with a cheesy smile, telling them to drop their guard. Nickel and Cage just hit him with a synchronized death glare. Harriet totally ignores them, confidently promising to protect the tiny princess himself. Nickel instantly roasts him, mocking the knight for being way too slow. Harriet dramatically covers his mouth, acting like he's going to cry from the insult. But the green-haired knight quickly snaps out of it, realizing they don't have time for this nonsense. Clearing his throat, he formally announces that he's actually here for the prince today. Nickel points to himself, totally confused as to why the knight is looking for him. Riona internally shakes her head, knowing the 10-year-old prince stands absolutely no chance in an argument against a 30-year-old veteran. Annoyed, Nickel tells Harriet to spit out the news quickly so he can get lost. Harriet sighs, delivering the message that the second prince's birthday banquet is happening the day after tomorrow. He strictly informs Nickel that his attendance is completely mandatory. Ignoring the warning, Nickel turns back to Riona with a massive smile, asking why she's holding onto him so cutely. Cage completely misreads the room and randomly suggests taking the princess on a picnic. Nickel enthusiastically agrees, promising to bring his little sister along next time. Riona narrows her eyes, fiercely deciding she won't give up on her grand plans just because these guys are being nice. Meanwhile, Harriet throws a total fit, absolutely baffled that the prince is ignoring him to chat with a toddler. Nickel snaps back, claiming his idea is actually for Riona's sake. Harriet pauses, genuinely concerned that something might be wrong with Her Highness. Nickel awkwardly asks if he should arrange for Riona to meet his mother, the formidable Fourth Majesty. He brightly assumes his mom would find the tiny princess just as cute as he does. Harriet stares at him deadpan, asking what his grand plan is after that. Nickel admits he has no clue. Harriet immediately shoots the idea down, knowing exactly how terrible that meeting would actually go. The knight scolds Nickel, reminding him that visiting the cursed Black Rose Palace every day is already breaking major royal rules. He fiercely warns the prince that Her Majesty will absolutely not treat Riona with the same affection he does. In fact, Harriet bluntly states they'd be incredibly lucky if the Fourth Majesty didn't just flat-out execute the baby. Nickel completely loses his temper. Golden magic crackles around him as he furiously yells at the knight not to insult his mother. Riona zones out from the yelling, staring at the dreary black roses in her garden. She remembers how the guys recently offered to rip up the dark garden and plant cheerful yellow flowers instead. But Riona hit them with a hard nope. She secretly loves the spooky goth aesthetic, it fits a legendary witch perfectly. Still, she squints at Cage, deeply confused by a strange, hidden mana in the palace that even the elite necromancer can't sense. She knows something is seriously off about this gloomy place. But she brushes it off, deciding she has much bigger fish to fry right now. Summoning a massive glowing magic circle, the tiny 3-year-old literally starts levitating. Dangling in midair, she feels super queasy, realizing her toddler body is definitely not meant for high-speed flying. Back inside her room, Cage is completely knocked out, snoring away after Riona hit her with a sneaky sleep spell. Riona knows she has exactly 1 hour before the spell breaks, so she needs to rush to the royal banquet. All 3 of her overly protective guardians strictly forbade her from going, but she's crashing the party anyway to see the chaos for herself. Lisping through her baby teeth, she commands herself to hurry up. Floating lightly through the trees, she hopes no one realizes she's actually using high-tier magic. But soon, she starts aggressively sulking about her tiny size. She angrily curses human biology, crying that baby animals can literally walk on day 1, while humans take years just to stop wobbling. A string of drool escapes her mouth as the physical strain of her tiny vessel kicks in. She lets out a heavy, dramatic sigh, absolutely exhausted by how weak and insignificant her 3-year-old body really is. The little white-haired princess sighs, complaining that a witch's life is just too weary. But she quickly brushes it off, deciding she can put up with this torturous life for a few more years. Why? Because she knows the day will come when everyone bows at her feet. And when she finally takes over, she vows to completely ban the word cute, since she absolutely hates it. Suddenly, she realizes she's running extremely late for the banquet. She looks around for directions, but strangely, the palace grounds are completely empty. The sun starts beating down on her, making the walk even more exhausting. Her little legs give out as she struggles to even pronounce her own frustration. She finally admits she's completely lost in the massive gardens. Looking around helplessly, she wonders where she is even supposed to go. Exhausted, she just plops down on the ground like a broken toy, wishing she had checked a map. Just then, she spots a massive field of shiny white rocks. She realizes they're actually silver scales shed by a hibernating dragon named Yasekina. She pouts, feeling like she walked all this way for nothing. She thinks the old dragon is completely useless for leaving behind rubbish instead of cold, hard gold. But since the giant lizard is asleep, she can't even complain to him. Suddenly, she notices a glowing magic barrier blocking her path. She examines it, noting that it's a super sensitive alarm system. It's a complex spell meant for high-level wizards to keep intruders out. But for her, it's a total piece of cake, and she casually disables it with a single touch. With the path clear, she rushes forward into the pile of scales. A devious smirk creeps onto her face as she plots a little mischief. She starts picking up the dragon scales, claiming she definitely isn't jealous of the old beast's reverence. She tries to convince herself she's just doing this out of pure boredom. Sitting around is no fun anyway, so she gets right to work. She starts carefully arranging the heavy silver stones on the ground. When asked what she's making, she doesn't hold back. She proudly reveals she's building a giant picture of the dragon getting absolutely wrecked. Meanwhile, the icy emperor watches her, completely immune to her usual adorable charms. She starts sweating buckets, wondering why he's suddenly emitting such intense pressure. The emperor just stares her down, looking seriously intimidating. She gets a massive wave of déjà vu, remembering the painful time he forcefully pumped mana into her as a baby. She narrows her eyes, convinced this guy is plotting something wild again. Suddenly, a green-haired knight comes sprinting across the courtyard, screaming for the emperor. The princess recognizes the voice immediately. She beams with joy, totally hyped to see him. The knight pants heavily, scolding the emperor for ditching him. He complains about being left behind, completely out of breath. But the second he spots the princess, he instantly melts into a puddle, gushing over how dangerously cute she is. He literally slaps himself to snap out of his fanboy trance. Getting serious, he asks her what she's doing out here all alone. She proudly admits she sneaked out, using her absolute best baby talk. Her adorable mispronunciation hits him like a critical strike to the heart. He asks why she sneaked out, and she tells him she's trying to get to the birthday party. The knight gently reminds her that she wasn't supposed to go. He tells her to head back while he calls for an escort. Then he turns to the emperor, awkwardly reminding the ruler that this is literally his own daughter. The emperor looks completely blank, suddenly remembering he sent her to choose a weapon ages ago. The princess bristles with absolute rage, realizing her own father straight up forgot she existed this whole time. The knight quickly chimes in, reminding the emperor that she actually chose the legendary necromancer, Cage. Harriet frantically tries to explain who the little princess is, but the emperor still looks completely clueless. The princess gets totally ticked off, annoyed that she remembered him while he completely forgot his own kid. But as she stares into his cold eyes, it finally clicks. The emperor suddenly speaks her name, lacing his voice with mana that makes her flinch instantly. She glares, convinced he's silently warning her not to cause any trouble. But she immediately flips the switch, throwing on her brightest, most innocent smile to play the perfect little angel. Harriet tries to hold back a laugh, while she internally justifies that she has to do this to survive. Putting on her best baby voice, she explains she got completely lost trying to find the birthday party. She hits them with maximum puppy dog eyes, secretly mourning her lost pride as a fearsome witch. But the emperor just stares at her in dead silence, making her inwardly groan. Still, she reminds herself that she has to win him over, or else he might execute her if he ever finds out her true identity. While the emperor is stone cold, Harriet is literally having a heart attack from how insanely cute she is. The green-haired knight gently reminds her that she needs to speak formally to the ruler of the empire. He eagerly coaches her, suggesting she use the proper title, Imperial Father. He smiles, fully expecting her to be a well-behaved little royal. Instead, she completely ignores him and loudly yells, "Daddy." Harriet instantly passes out from the sheer cuteness, but the emperor remains absolutely frozen like a statue. Seeing him so unfazed totally awakens her competitive spirit, and she vows to break this guy's icy shell. With Harriet still malfunctioning on the ground, she begs to be taken to the party. She hits the emperor with the most devastatingly adorable pleading look known to mankind. But he shoots her down with a flat, merciless no, leaving her totally shook. Suddenly, Harriet panics and points out that her tiny legs are bleeding. She finally notices the scrapes and realizes her knees actually sting like crazy. But she keeps her cool, trying to think of a tactful way out of this mess. The emperor narrows his eyes, demanding to know how she even bypassed the high-level barrier to enter the gravel area. She totally plays dumb, pointing at the rocks and acting like a clueless toddler. She just shrugs, claiming she casually walked right in. Surprisingly, the emperor buys it and tells her to come along, making her smirk like a total mastermind who just completely finessed him. She happily trots after them, but her little legs are seriously burning. Out of nowhere, she reaches out and aggressively grabs the emperor's royal cape. He stops and stares down at her, totally caught off guard. Harriet bursts into tears again, touched by what he thinks is a pitiful child yearning for her father's warmth. But in reality, the princess is just exhausted and internally screaming that her legs are about to snap. She glares up at the emperor, asking why he's just standing there. Her tiny legs start violently shaking as she demands to be picked up immediately. Suddenly, she loses her balance and totally face blunts. But the emperor quickly swoops in and catches her, prompting a sneaky little peek from the princess. She cheers internally, absolutely hyped that she just successfully manipulated the most terrifying man in the empire. He effortlessly carries her away while Harriet continues to fanboy in the background. The knight is in total disbelief that the ruthless emperor actually yielded to a little kid. He snaps out of it and sprints after them toward the banquet hall. Meanwhile, the party preparations are in full swing, with the maids setting up a flawless outdoor feast. But the head maid is sweating bullets, completely stressed about the second prince's arrival. She notes that calling him meticulous is an understatement. The kid is straight up obsessive. The maids scramble to make sure every single flower and plate is placed with mathematical precision. Just when they think the tables look absolutely perfect, someone points out that a single knife is shifted off-center by a millimeter. The second prince is standing there with a literal measuring tape, glaring at the silverware like it just insulted his ancestors. The maid instantly drops to the floor in absolute terror, begging for forgiveness. She frantically blames the wind, promising to fix the monumental mistake before he completely loses his mind. The white-haired Prince Nickel coldly dismisses the excuses of the banquet staff. But his blonde brother steps in, faking a smile while throwing shade on his own birthday. He dramatically asks if they really need to shed blood on such a joyous occasion. Nickel simply stares him down with absolutely zero emotion. The blonde prince tries to shoo the terrified maids away from the tension. But Nickel instantly blocks their path with crackling electricity, trapping them in place. Annoyed, the brother warns that their imperial father is arriving soon and shouldn't see him covered in blood. He points out that the meticulous emperor absolutely hates a messy scene. Taking the hint, the maids finally make a mad dash for safety. The blonde prince warns Nickel to rein in his temper before he gets stabbed to death. Nickel just flashes a confident smirk, asking if it's fine as long as he avoids getting stabbed in the back. The blonde brother's fake smile drops as he realizes his assassination plans are completely exposed. Nickel sighs, noting his brother's frequent trips outside the palace grounds. With a wicked grin, he reveals he knows all about his secret visits to the Black Rose Palace. He even jokes about dragging the 12th princess into their little political drama. The blonde prince grits his teeth, muttering that his brother is a crazy bastard. Dropping the nice guy act, he flares up with intense golden lightning, ready to completely wreck Nickel right then and there. Nickel just scoffs, totally unbothered by the sudden threat. Swirling with icy magic, Nickel decides he needs to crush this guy before his power levels get out of hand. But before they can throw hands, a servant frantically announces the emperor's arrival. Meanwhile, earlier that day, the emperor is carrying the reincarnated princess through the royal gardens. She happily cuddles into his chest, enjoying the secure feeling of his ridiculously buff build. The emperor quietly wonders if he should just win everyone over to his side using this soft approach. The little princess realizes that gathering strong allies might actually be a solid survival strategy. In her past life as Alina, she tried to handle everything solo and ended up brutally slain. She vividly remembers the exact moment the one person she trusted totally backstabbed her. That ultimate betrayal fueled her absolute hatred for all humans. Yet now stuck in this tiny new body, she admits she's actually terrified of being alone. She refuses to let another human take her out, but right now, her immense demonic magic is heavily sealed. To survive, she knows she needs to maximize her physical potential and gather useful pawns. As they walk, she decides the simplest method is just recruiting the strongest people around her. But she quickly scraps the idea of relying on something as useless as trust. Instead, she plans to flex her overwhelming power to make them bow down like obedient dogs. She figures gaining total control of the empire will make it way easier to hunt down Lucas, her past life killer. Just thinking about that traitor makes her blood boil all over again. She starts wondering how his kingdom is holding up without her running the show. But first, she needs to figure out exactly how many years have passed since she was executed. Looking at the emperor's youthful face, she guesses she hasn't been dead for too long. She lets out an incredibly sinister, villainous giggle as she plots her grand revenge. The emperor's green-haired aide completely misreads the room and starts fawning over her. He gushes about how adorable her little smile is, totally missing her evil aura. She side-eyes him with utter disgust, questioning why she even needs to keep this annoying guy around. Frustrated by both of them, she literally starts slapping the emperor's chest like a tiny bongo drum. Suddenly, she stops cold as she senses a massive disruption in the surrounding mana. She instantly recognizes the chaotic energy coming from the two princes clashing. She realizes one of the fighters is using an extremely rare ice magic. The Emperor notices the exact same thing, recognizing his own signature element in the distance. The little princess stretches her arms out, eager to go watch the chaos unfold. But the green-haired aide quickly steps in, blocking her path to keep her out of the crossfire. He tries to play it off as the Emperor worrying about her mana overflowing, but the Emperor bluntly denies it while squishing her cheeks like a stress ball. The green-haired aide giggles as the Emperor bluntly denies shielding the tiny princess. But she quickly realizes he is actually blocking the chaotic mana for her. The aide mentions he warned the princes about fighting outside the arena and worries she might get hurt. She just pouts, secretly knowing she could easily fold both of those kids. When the aide calls her frail, she totally disagrees with his definition of weak. The aide asks if he should step in and break up the fight. The Emperor simply steps forward and orders him to announce his arrival. The aide agrees, knowing his presence alone will instantly kill the mood. He loudly announces the Emperor as they step out onto the balcony overlooking the battle. Instantly, the intense clash of mana completely cuts off. The aide assumes the sudden shift in pressure terrified the little princess. He casually mentions most people would pass out from that aura and asks if he should call a doctor. She stubbornly brushes it off, annoyed by the petty squabble. But she quickly gets distracted by the Emperor's hands, thoroughly enjoying the accidental back massage. Down in the courtyard, the blonde prince is shocked to see his father carrying the new princess. The aide laughs at his reaction while she hides her face in total embarrassment. To everyone's absolute shock, the cold Emperor actually smiles and pokes her cheek. The blonde prince is completely dumbfounded since their father never shows affection like that. Meanwhile, Nickel coldly eyes the princess, debating if he should just eliminate her right now. Realizing everyone is distracted, he thinks it's the perfect window to strike. Gripping his sword, Nickel suddenly dashes straight for the 3-year-old, fully intending to pack her up. But the Emperor casually shuts it down, reminding him that minors must have a sword to duel. Nickel realizes he just severely messed up. Panicking, the princess demands the aide help Nickel, but he refuses to interfere in a royal succession battle. She points out her dad just intervened, but the aide explains it's only because she was unarmed. Nickel actually has a weapon, he just left it stuck in a dead assassin like a glorified toothpick. Desperate, the blonde prince starts screaming for his hidden backup to come out. The princess realizes Nickel is about to get completely jumped, which completely ruins her plan to use him as her pawn. Refusing to let her future minion die, she starts panicking. She decides to use a weak mental magic spell just to give Nickel a quick opening to escape. The battered blonde prince grips his weapon, swearing to stab Nickel at least once before going down. Suddenly, a massive magical pulse hits. The princess totally goofs and accidentally drops a high-level third circle spell instead of a weak one. The Emperor notices her magical slip-up and just smirks, clearly impressed. He pats her head, tells the aide they're leaving, and the aide flashes a thumbs up to the bewildered boys. White feathers drift down from the sky as her overpowered spell settles. The aide gloats to the Emperor, bragging that he knew the princess was built different. The Emperor just walks away, looking incredibly smug about his overpowered daughter. Back on the ground, the princess puts on an innocent baby act, asking the battered blonde prince if he got hurt. He tries to flex, claiming the sun god gives him power, but she internally roasts him for boasting while bleeding out. He spreads his arms wide to show off his supposed strength. He even twirls his foot around to prove he's totally fine. The princess notices that he's completely dropped his killing intent toward Nickel. Covered in blood, Nickel walks up to her, double-checking her names. She wonders if his assassination attempt actually worked in the chaos. But Nickel just softly thanks her for saving both of their lives. She cringes hard, absolutely disgusted because she only meant to save him, not the blonde guy. Nickel asks if she intervened because she hates seeing her brothers fight. She awkwardly looks away, totally unable to admit she just views him as a useful political tool. It turns out her magic completely neutralized the deadly poison someone had prepared in the shadows. Cut to later, the stubborn princess flat-out refuses to leave her room. Her maid angrily scolds her for being a little brat who never listens to a single word she says. The princess decides to play it cool, figuring that hiding her true magical powers is the best way to stay out of trouble. She reaches out to the garden flowers, realizing that even though she got caught using magic before, nothing in her life has really changed. She plans to just keep up her cute disguise and enjoy her peaceful new life without any guilty conscience. But her peace is instantly shattered when an arrogant blonde prince comes out of nowhere and absolutely whacks her on the back of the head. She stumbles forward as the boy scolds her for ignoring him. He glares at her, completely dumbfounded that this tiny toddler is supposedly the genius magician who saved the fourth prince. He struggles to comprehend how a literal 3-year-old could pull off high-level spells. His ego is totally bruised, especially since he hasn't even mastered a basic fireball yet. He proudly claims to be the best fire magician in the Imperial family, making her supposed talent a direct insult to his pride. Refusing to accept it, he vows to defend his title even if it costs him his life. He aggressively grabs her shoulder, demanding to know why she isn't answering him. Taunting her, he asks if she's just scared, accusing her of spreading fake rumors about her abilities for clout. He gets right in her face, asking if she just passed out on her feet. Big mistake. The princess snaps, dropping the innocent baby act as a massive, glowing pink magic circle expands in front of her. The sheer force of the spell absolutely blasts the boy backward. She coldly tells him to stop being annoying and get lost as he hits the ground like a sack of potatoes. Completely humiliated, the boy furiously glares back at her. Losing his mind, he conjures a massive flare of real fire magic. He threatens to roast her to a crisp from head to toe for daring to strike him. He calls her an arrogant brat, claiming she has no idea who she just messed with. But the princess remains totally unfazed, casually pointing a single finger at his attack. In a flash, she completely neutralizes his spell, asking if that weak spark is really all he's got. The boy watches in sheer panic as his flames instantly fizzle out into nothing. With a wicked little grin, she decides to teach this kid what real firepower looks like. She internally scoffs that he actually thought he could threaten the greatest fire magician with such a pathetic flame. Suddenly, she unleashes an absolutely massive, towering inferno behind her, flexing an insane difference in skill. The boy is left trembling, his brain totally short-circuiting at the impossible level of magic coming from a toddler. He is so utterly terrified by her overwhelming aura that he literally wets his pants on the spot. Seeing him completely broken, the princess dials back her flames, deciding to spare him since he's barely a threat. But suddenly, she gets flustered as she senses a chilling and familiar energy approaching. The boy sits on the ground confused as the princess starts visibly panicking. It's the emperor. Without skipping a beat, she instantly flips the switch, pointing at the boy and crying that he hit her. She runs up to her father with fake tears, asking him for help. She dramatically points to her cheek, playing the ultimate victim card to perfection. But the emperor isn't entirely fooled. He quietly wonders why she goes out of her way to hide her overwhelming power from him. He suddenly remembers a recent conversation with his green-haired aide. The aide had gently scolded him, pointing out that a tiny child must desperately miss her father's attention. He suggested that her weak act might just be a cry for a father's warm embrace. The princess stares up at the emperor, wondering why he's just looking at her blankly instead of punishing the boy. Taking the aide's advice to heart, the emperor gently scoops her up into his arms. The princess is completely caught off guard, not expecting him to actually comfort her so warmly. Meanwhile, the terrified boy stammers, trying to defend himself to his father. The princess just closes her eyes and leans in, letting the boy desperately try to explain her massive magical outburst. The emperor isn't having it. He coldly glares at the boy, reminding him of his strict order against fighting unarmed. With an intimidating aura, he declares that the boy has officially disobeyed his direct command. Playing into it, the princess snuggles closer, sneakily urging her dad to scold him even more. She gives the boy a smug side-eye, hoping the emperor doesn't just let this slide with a few harsh words. The emperor stares the boy down, asking if he plans to defy him further. Completely defeated and trembling, the boy bows his head and accepts his punishment. As they walk away, the emperor thinks about his cutthroat, backstabbing family, leaving him deeply conflicted over why his incredibly strong daughter acts so defenseless in such a dangerous place. The emperor carries the little princess, explaining that he hides his true strength to protect his people. He looks down at her seriously, making sure she grasps the weight of his words. He then casually mentions that there's someone important she needs to meet. The princess looks up with big, curious eyes, wondering who this mystery person is. But the emperor sighs, admitting he's actually totally dreading this introduction. They step into a massive library, interrupting a guy waiting inside. A smug, dark-haired man greets them, hinting that the princess might become his new magic student. She immediately throws a tantrum, wanting absolutely nothing to do with this guy. But the dark-haired mage just smirks, clearly seeing right through her little act. The princess lays the baby talk on thick, pretending she's just a normal, clueless toddler. He outright calls her a liar, refusing to buy into her innocent facade. The mage then threatens to drop his time-stopping magic and expose her secret to her father. He casually points out that the emperor will notice his frozen spell very soon. Holding up a finger, he asks if ratting her out would really end well for her. Dropping the cute act, the tiny princess glares and demands to know exactly what he knows. He explains that the Imperial family is blessed with the power of a dragon. But he drops a massive bomb, her soul color completely mismatches the royal bloodline. He leans in and asks for her real age, but she nervously sticks to her toddler story. Grabbing her tiny hand, he tells her to stop playing games. He accurately guesses that her ancient soul has been trapped for around 300 years. The princess absolutely loses her mind in panic as her biggest secret gets exposed. He even offers to rip her soul out and toss it into an empty body if she wants. Filled with rage, the princess unleashes her own power and literally shatters his time magic like fragile glass. The emperor rushes to check on her, totally clueless about the wild magical standoff that just happened. The mage smoothly pivots, offering his services as her teacher. He gives her a subtle, threatening look, silently asking if he should spill her secret. He smiles brightly, completely cornering her in front of her dad. Realizing she has zero options, she grits her teeth and glares at the smug punk. She forces a smile and switches back to her cringe baby voice to accept the magic lessons. The reluctant deal is sealed under the bright sky of the Imperial palace. Meanwhile, a young blonde prince is stubbornly wandering the halls despite his injuries. A worried maid chases after him, begging him to go back to bed and rest. But he rudely shuts her down, desperate to reunite with his little bunny. The prince storms outside, realizing he's right in front of his own palace gates. He stops in his tracks, glaring furiously at something totally out of place. He spots the dark-haired mage hovering outside the princess's balcony like an absolute creep. The mage ignores his audience, casually leaning on the railing to interrogate the baby. He presses the princess again, demanding to know her true identity. But she hits him with a flat denial, refusing to drop any more lore. Suddenly, a blue-haired knight lunges from the shadows, ready to slice him up. The mage acts surprised for a split second before smoothly deflecting the attack. Floating in the air, the mage laughs as the tiny princess boldly threatens to wreck him herself. The knight looks totally confused, wondering why the baby is beefing with an assassin. The princess sighs and introduces the floating weirdo as her new magic teacher from the Western Tower. The knight completely freezes, realizing she just attacked a massive VIP. She asks if the princess knows just how dangerous this man really is. Playing along, the princess asks for the gossip, and the knight mentions the Battle of Harleine. Turns out, this guy is an absolute unit who once wiped out thousands of enemy soldiers entirely on his own. The mage smirks like a boss, right before the knight hilariously dubs him a harasser. The princess nervously shushes her guard just as something else catches her eye. The princess is totally stressed out, realizing her strict orders to keep everyone out were ignored. Outside the door, a white-haired boy argues with the guards, loudly claiming he's a magician. With a sudden, accidental sneeze, he blasts the doors wide open with magic, completely interrupting her thoughts. But instead of throwing hands, he holds up a floating basket of sweets, insisting he doesn't want trouble. He cautiously asks if the rumors are true and she's really leaving the Imperial palace forever. Sweating nervously, he repeats that he has zero intention of fighting her. He points out the obvious, she's literally just a tiny 3-year-old toddler. But that completely fires her up, and she fiercely demands a duel right on the spot. He awkwardly looks away, saying her size isn't exactly the issue. With her massive guard looming behind her, she demands to know what the real problem is. He bluntly states he refuses to fight opponents weaker than him, instantly ticking her off. She flashes a totally unhinged, chilling smile that screams danger. He tries to deflect by offering the snacks, but she challenges him, asking what happens if she wins. He brushes it off, confidently claiming there's absolutely no way he loses to a baby. Waving her hands playfully, she presses him on the what-if scenario. He finally caves, promising to fulfill any wish she wants if she actually pulls off a miracle. She hypes herself up, getting into a fighting stance and promising to give it her all. The boy sighs, figuring he'll just have to go super easy on her to avoid hurting a kid. Suddenly, a flash of magic tears right through his sleeve, leaving him completely stunned. The princess smirks mischievously, clicking her tongue because she was actually aiming to slice his neck. Panicking, he realizes this toddler is an absolute menace and decides to just bind her legs. But the match is already over, and she flashes a bright grin to claim her victory. Brought to his knees in defeat, he listens as she officially claims him as her new subordinate. She lays down the law in a cutesy voice, declaring that losers have to obey the winners. Completely defeated, he slumps his shoulders and accepts his fate. Without missing a beat, she immediately hands her new minion his very first mission. He looks confused, and she tells him to pay attention to the ground. She squats down and starts scribbling something in the dirt with her tiny hands. Pointing at her drawing, she tells him this is exactly where he needs to go. The boy stares in awe as the symbol on the ground starts glowing with intense magical energy. He recognizes the crest immediately. It's the kingdom of Cawell. She orders him to scout the kingdom, paying very close attention to how their king is doing. The boy connects the dots, realizing she's using him so she doesn't get her own hands dirty. She casually drops a massive bomb, announcing she plans to assassinate the king herself. He freaks out, warning her it's too dangerous, but she hilariously tells him to shut up and follow orders. Crossing her arms, she threatens to beat him up again if he doesn't like the plan. But instead of being mad, the boy blushes hard, feeling honored to be trusted by her. He covers his face, getting super emotional that she considers him one of her true allies. Meanwhile, the dark-haired mage lounges in a fancy room, pondering the strange nature of dragons changing forms. Staring at the ceiling, he seriously starts questioning if the princess even has dragon blood at all. He thinks back to their encounter, realizing her aura felt way darker and packed with pure murderous intent. The mage flashes a sinister smile, hinting that a chaotic reunion is definitely on the horizon. Cut back to the princess, she tells a maid she's heading to the library with her scary guard lurking right behind her. The maid smiles warmly, praising the little princess for keeping her promises. The princess proudly puffs out her chest, completely ignoring the giant guard looming over her like a shadow. The maid cheerfully waves her off, wishing her a good trip. Suddenly, the guard starts mumbling, leaving the princess completely confused by the weird vibe. Blushing and looking away, the elite warrior stammers that she's actually jealous of the second prince. The princess looks like her brain just completely short-circuited from the sheer absurdity of it. She stares deadpan at her guard, realizing this deadly knight is literally pouting over not being her official #1 subordinate. The princess totally flexes on her guard, explaining that while a subordinate is just a tool, she'll actually protect her people. Fast forward 5 years, the princess is chilling in the library, calculating the timeline since her past life ended. She flips through a massive history book, frustrated that there's zero intel on the Carol Kingdom to help her plot her revenge. Her mind flashes back to a psychotic blonde dude drenched in blood, reminding her of his twisted loyalty. The memory of a brutal murder flashes before her eyes, and she admits she hasn't forgotten the stench of that day. Suddenly, a crackling bolt of yellow lightning strikes right inside the library. The dark-haired mage casually materializes on the desk, bragging that while he avoided the thug-filled kingdom, he totally met some locals. Her eyes go wide as she immediately demands the juicy details. He smirks at her obvious obsession with Carol, causing her to lose her cool and start yelling in baby talk. She grabs his fancy collar and shakes him like a maraca, screaming that she's destined to win it all. She challenges his doubts, but he just hits her with a smooth, however. Pointing a finger up, he playfully reminds her that she's literally only 3 years old right now. He flashes a smug smile, fully knowing he struck a nerve. He explains that even with her insane potential, there's one massive problem keeping him from placing his bets on her. With a quick snap, it absolutely rains gold coins around him, and he tells her the choice is hers. He basically proposes a magical contract, asking if she wants to partner up with a 200-year-old prodigy. Sitting amidst the treasure, she hits him with the most confident, smug little smirk. A literal mountain of gold blocks the aisle as he asks if she wants to claim the entire stash. Flashing the ultimate capitalist smile, he promises the whole vault if she just swears her loyalty to him. But there's a catch: she has to stake all of her precious mana on the oath. She immediately raises an eyebrow, complaining that risking her mana is literally gambling with her life. Pointing right back at him, she calls him a total fool and starts laying down her own ground rules. Rule #1, her reincarnated soul secret stays strictly between them. He happily agrees, but when she demands he stays by her side until she rules the empire, he teases her for being clingy. Finally, she orders him to maintain his shady connections with the Carol Kingdom. He sweats nervously, realizing this toddler is deadass hiring him as a Black Ops spy. She nods firmly, completely sealing the deal before he decides to drop his own questions. Shrugging off his curiosity, he leans back and casually offers to just throw more money at her. He gleefully accepts the spy job, totally disrespecting his own prestigious title as the Magic Tower Master. The princess stares at him with pure, unadulterated disgust. Moving on, he asks exactly how long this wild contract is supposed to last. She states it's only valid until she finally reaches adulthood. He double-checks if she means 18 years old, and she confirms it. He breathes a massive sigh of relief, admitting he thought he'd be babysitting her for eternity. She violently snaps back that he's way too annoying to keep around forever, as glowing purple magic seals their pact. Shifting gears, she starts muttering about geography, realizing she doesn't need to stress over certain borders. But then a terrifying thought hits her, and she totally panics about a super scary witch living there. The mage smiles calmly, confirming the wicked witch was definitely real. But before she can spiral, he drops the bombshell that the witch is already dead. Clenching her tiny fists, she nervously asks if he's absolutely sure. She demands his sources, needing to know exactly how he got this intel. He shrugs, explaining that the news is literally impossible to avoid. Apparently, the King of Carol has been obnoxiously flexing to the whole world that he killed the witch himself. Smiling dangerously, she holds up a gold coin and hints at a massive technicality. She casually flicks the coin at his head, warning him that spending her past life's money might actually get them cursed. Later on, she rubs her eyes and begs her maid for a nap, but gets totally rejected because the fourth prince is waiting. The maid guilt-trips her, saying a good princess never misses an appointment. Gripping her bunny plushie for dear life, she begrudgingly agrees to go. The maid happily notes her obedience, while the princess silently plans her next move down the hall. She enters a ridiculously creepy dark palace wing, smiling because the gloomy aesthetic is an absolute vibe. Walking through the dark halls, the princess feels a strong flow of mana coursing through the air. She smirks, realizing her magical power is growing at an absolutely wild rate. Back in a cozy room, the blonde fourth prince casually asks what she was up to in the library. She flashes a devious little grin, thinking about the massive trouble she just stirred up. The prince completely blanks, shocked that his tiny sister actually knows how to read. The maid chimes in proudly, bragging that the toddler can already write every letter. His eyes light up like a fanboy, absolutely convinced his little bunny is a once-in-a-generation genius. As she casually sips her tea, she brushes off a dark conversation, claiming she doesn't remember the details. The prince shifts gears, warmly calling out her real name. He leans in, demanding to know why that crazy punk Evich is suddenly her subordinate. He glares at the floor, warning her that the white-haired mage is completely untrustworthy. He reminds her that Evich literally tried to ice her the first time they met. Looking deeply into her eyes, he dramatically swears that he will never ever betray her. The princess mentally sighs, wondering why these hyperpowerful guys are all lining up to be her minions. The prince blushes hard, bragging that the other subordinates would be insanely jealous if they knew she patted his head. Meanwhile, back at the library, the dark-haired mage tosses a gold coin, realizing he totally got played. Catching it smoothly, he mutters that it's the first time he's ever just given away a magician's life-binding oath. Turning around, he casually asks his unexpected guest if they're mad about him visiting the palace. The green-haired knight Cage glares daggers at him, fuming over the mage's secret meeting with the princess. Cage loses it, pointing a finger and screaming that this whole setup screams danger. The mage just smirks, playfully asking exactly who is in danger here. He sighs dramatically, claiming he can't spill the tea freely. Putting a hand over his face, he fakes a sob story about his deep emotional scars, which Cage immediately calls out as total cap. Suddenly, the Emperor himself steps out of the shadows, offering the mage a priceless fairy jewel. The mage's eyes instantly sharpen with greed as he asks how many jewels are on the table. Cage sweats nervously, noting that while the Emperor is a monster in combat, he completely lacks the dragon's bloodline. He pieces it together, the tiny 12th princess is the true heir to the dragon's power. The mage drops the joke, agreeing that all the rumors point straight to her. Staring him down, the Emperor states he refuses to ally with anyone tied to the enemy Carol kingdom. The mage just laughs it off, shamelessly admitting he's only in it for the bag. He defends himself, claiming his shady connections never actually hurt the Empire, while Cage silently fumes. The Emperor coldly replies that if he had harmed the Empire, he'd already be a corpse. Brushing off the death threat, the mage smiles and asks if the Emperor is still chasing useless ghosts. The Emperor hits him where it hurts, bluntly stating that his brother is already dead. The mood instantly drops as the Emperor tells him to face reality. The mage absolutely loses it, summoning a massive storm of purple lightning and threatening to nuke the room. Cage forces a panicked smile as the walls literally start crumbling around them. Suddenly, the injured blonde prince bursts into the chaos, screaming about the absolute mess. The Emperor stands there unfazed, completely matching the prince's annoyed energy. Out of nowhere, the mage gets totally clobbered on the head, yelling that he just saved them. Cut to the injured prince, he fiercely snaps that apologies need to be backed by actual action. He glares ruthlessly, ordering his guards to beat a terrified maid and toss her out on the street. The green-haired maid sobs uncontrollably, begging for just one more chance. Cold as ice, he orders them to cut her mouth off. But suddenly, Evich arrives in a flash of lightning, furious about the disrespect. The injured prince grits his teeth, looking at his bandaged hand and cursing the inhumane torture he went through. Just then, a stoic messenger arrives with a highly anticipated letter from the first prince. Later that night, the princess is tucked into bed as her maid reassures her that everything is fine. The maid smiles softly, deeply relieved that the tiny princess is growing so strong. But as she drifts off, the princess secretly agrees with her guard's lingering paranoia. She knows she's beloved by most, but she still has no idea what kind of absolute monsters the first prince and sixth princess might be. The princess breaks into a cold sweat, staring at her sweet-looking maid and wondering if she's been hiding twin swords under her dress this whole time. Glancing at the totally wrecked assassin on the floor, she realizes her nanny is actually a top-tier lethal fighter. The maid gently holds her tiny hand, noticing the princess spacing out and asking if something is wrong. Poking at her curiosity, the princess flat out asks about her maid's true identity. The nanny just smiles warmly, guessing the kid is curious after seeing her absolutely pop off with her swords yesterday. Without skipping a beat, she casually reveals that she's actually from Sorudio. The princess immediately drops some deep lore, asking if she means the legendary warriors from the Aslan Republic. The maid blinks in shock, completely stunned that a toddler knows about complex geopolitics. But internally, the princess sighs. Of course she knows, she literally lived through it in her past life. Her mind flashes back to her past life, recalling how the brutal battles against Sorudio were totally unavoidable. In her memory, a blonde king argues for war to gain land, while her past self completely flames him for his arrogance. She fiercely slaps his hand away, reminding the stubborn fool that Aslan houses the strongest fighters on the continent. Washing her hands of the incoming disaster, she storms off and declares that Carol is too broke to afford a war. But sadly, that bastard Raku's ignored her warnings and dragged them into chaos anyway. Snapping back to the present, the maid smiles and reveals she used to guard the princess's late mother, Princess Aspera. A somber flashback shows the late mother looking out a window, as the maid hints she never wanted to give birth to the emperor's child. But her mood brightens as she reassures the toddler that things are much better now. She kneels down with a loving smile, declaring that serving the little princess makes everything worth it. Still, she admits with a bittersweet look that she misses her homeland and the late Princess Aspera. Suddenly, she gets super hyped, dropping the news that envoys from the Republic are arriving for the princess's 5th birthday. The princess immediately panics, realizing that if these envoys recognize her past identity, she is absolutely cooked. Later outside, the emperor carries her, smugly telling her to be grateful for his generosity since she totally jumped into his arms. She flashes a blindingly cute smile and thanks him, even though she has literally no idea what he's talking about. As they walk to the carriage, Jiros greets them, mentioning he heard there's a blessing taking place. The princess tilts her head in genuine confusion, wondering who exactly is getting blessed. The emperor looks down at her calmly. He drops a massive bombshell, revealing he heard rumors that she inherited the legendary dragon's blood. Startled, she immediately asks who leaked that rumor, and the emperor completely throws Jiros under the bus. The princess glares daggers at Jiros, who starts sweating bullets and waving his hands, swearing he didn't break their secret pact. The emperor completely ignores the chaos, while the princess hilariously praises Jiros in baby talk. Internally, she is doing a massive victory dance. If people think she's a dragon descendant, her true identity as a witch is perfectly hidden. Playing right into the rumor, she puffs out her chest and proudly declares she has dragon power, projecting a massive imaginary dragon aura. The emperor stares at her with a heavy, unreadable expression. Suddenly, a voice echoes in her head, complimenting her top-tier acting skills. She furiously snaps back via telepathy, completely terrifying Jiros and making him cry real tears. Jiros desperately begs for her attention, but she just ruthlessly tells him to shut up. Getting serious, she internally analyzes her new body, admitting it was born with an insanely rare 5th circle mana pool. Her eyes glow with sharp intensity as she realizes the dragon rumor physically makes no sense. If this body truly belonged to a dragon's soul would be inside it, not hers. Brushing off the headache-inducing lore, she decides to just roll with it as the white-haired boy runs up to the carriage. She glares at him, debating whether or not she should actually give him a proper goodbye. Like a perfectly trained knight, the boy kneels and kisses her tiny hand, vowing to keep his promises. Dropping her guard just a little, she firmly tells him to come back safely. Jiros instantly gets insanely jealous, whining about why she treats the kid so much better than him. The entire group freezes in terror as the emperor shoots Jiros a deadly, bone-chilling glare. The princess coldly states that she simply hates killing humans, hinting at her brutal past. Glancing up at her stoic father, she realizes the emperor is actually trying to protect her in his own twisted way. She boldly declares out loud that it honestly doesn't matter if the white-haired boy betrays her in the future. Flashing a confident peace sign, she cheerfully promises that she won't ever take a betrayal sitting down. The emperor looks down in awe as his tiny, fierce daughter vows to become the absolute strongest being in the empire. The princess quickly makes her exit, bluntly telling Jiros she isn't exactly a fan of priests. Jiro's just waves her off with a smirk, fully knowing they'll cross paths again soon. Inside the palace, a priest looks totally annoyed, complaining that he was kept waiting for her blessing. The emperor immediately shuts down the small talk and orders the guy to just do his job. The priest complies, focusing his holy mana to begin the ritual. But things instantly go sideways. The priest panics as his power gets forcefully sucked into the tiny princess. She winces and snaps at him, complaining that the overwhelming energy actually hurts. Everyone absolutely loses their minds, and the emperor steps up, threatening to end the priest right there. Realizing she almost blew her cover, the princess flashes a ridiculously cute smile and plays it off as a joke. The terrified priest clears his throat, awkwardly trying to recover his dignity. The emperor glares daggers at him, demanding to know why his daughter was in pain. Suddenly, the priest's eyes widen as a massive realization hits him. Dropping to his knees, he gently asks to hold the princess's hand one more time, promising not to hurt her. She cautiously hands it over, figuring the guy isn't plotting anything shady. The priest smiles in awe, stating he needs to send an urgent document to the temple right away. He confidently tells the emperor that the princess won't even need to wait to awaken her powers. While most royals take years to bloom, her mana is already completely off the charts. He firmly declares that she possesses the legendary body of a dragon. Internally, the princess is sweating bullets, knowing her human soul is struggling to control this overpowered vessel. She sits alone on her massive bed, frustrated that she can't instantly access her past life strength. Pouting like a regular toddler, she fumes over her temporary weakness. Suddenly, her maid Lin bursts into the room with crazy energy. She excitedly reveals a massive pile of presents stacked on the table, all addressed to the princess. Lin explains that word of her dragon blessing got out, and the nobles are already aggressively kissing up to her. The princess smirks, realizing these are straight-up bribes, as Lin suggests throwing a massive ball for her next birthday. She stares at the mountain of gifts, letting the idea of a grand party marinate. Her knight nods in agreement, pointing out that the mysterious first prince is returning soon anyway. The princess squints suspiciously, wondering if this first prince is actually a big deal. But she quickly gets annoyed and tells her knight to drop the subject. Later, the blonde fourth prince aggressively warns her to avoid the first prince at all costs, calling him a total psycho. He explains the guy is absolutely merciless to the weak, making the princess fiercely protective of her favorite lackey. Pointing a wooden practice sword at him, she vows to train him so he can completely wreck the first prince. The blonde prince shrinks back, terrified, claiming his older brother's power is literally unmatched. Sick of his whining, the princess decides it's time for some extreme exposure therapy and opens a training domain. With a flick of her tiny finger, she activates a massive, complex magic circle right in his face. The prince completely folds and sprints for the door, begging her to stop the madness. Furious at his cowardice, she summons a terrifying red orb of destruction, ready to blast him into next week. Meanwhile, in the emperor's office, an aide bursts in to announce that the first prince has officially returned. The aide nervously notes the overwhelming holy power radiating through the palace. Without a word, the emperor immediately drops everything and storms out of the room. Cut to the princess, looking completely exhausted and fed up with someone's nonsense. The white-haired first prince kneels before her in the dirt, casually stating she's perfect, but he'll wait for her to grow up. She glares at him, covered in scratches and totally bewildered by his arrogance. He coldly orders her to come with him. Suddenly, her mind flashes back to a traumatic memory of her past life, watching two ambitious traitors plot against the world. She snaps back to reality, dodging a massive explosion and screaming at the first prince as he vanishes. Staring down a wall of raging fire, she looks absolutely furious and ready to throw hands. But her eyes snap open in the dark. It was all just a violently intense nightmare. She immediately runs crying into the emperor's arms, as the real first prince stands nearby, coldly stating she shouldn't interfere. Bruised and exhausted, the tiny princess rests her head on her father's shoulder, realizing this family drama is going to be an absolute war. The emperor turns his back on the first prince, coldly ordering him to leave Leona alone. Without skipping a beat, the emperor throws up a massive magic shield around the tiny princess, glaring like an absolute menace. Later, the emperor sprawls across his bed, dramatically complaining about his body melting. The dark-haired tower master casually checks a price tag on his magnifying glass, telling him he just needs to rest for 10 days. The emperor groans about how annoying it is, frustrated that he didn't find any solid info on Leona's powers. The tower master mutters about why his highness even protected her, figuring he'd normally just play dead in that situation. The emperor questions why everyone is so obsessed with protecting the 12th princess. Flashing a totally unhinged smile, the emperor vows to make whoever crossed him pay with their life. The Tower Master completely agrees, gassing him up as the only one fit to rule the empire. Tossing the blankets aside, the Emperor declares that Leona's so-called protectors are nothing but his servants. Suddenly, the Tower Master throws up a glowing defensive shield. He snaps at an intruder, furious that the First Prince ignored his strict warning to stay away. The First Prince fakes a dramatic tear, pouting that they were way too harsh on him last time. The Emperor gives him a deadpan, unimpressed stare, completely immune to the crocodile tears. Dropping the act, the First Prince summons a lethal ball of yellow energy, smirking as he admits he would have absolutely wrecked them all. The Emperor just forces a tight smile, sarcastically asking why the prince is being so aggressive. Cut back to Leona's fiery flashback. She screams at the escaping First Prince, furious she can't land a hit before the Emperor shields her. Holding her close, the Emperor warmly promises that she won't die because she's his precious daughter. But Leona is sweating bullets, knowing if this guy finds out she's actually a reincarnated witch, he'll literally cancel her subscription to life. Later on, the First Prince casually squishes Leona's cheeks, downplaying his massive fight with the Emperor as a minor scolding. He warns her that staying in this toxic palace will ruin her mental health, but she fiercely snaps back that he's completely crazy too. He totally loses it, throwing a mini tantrum and arguing that his brand of crazy is totally normal. Leona glares at him, reminding him she's growing taller and packing a seriously mean punch. She crosses her tiny arms, proudly flexing that she's got a whole squad of defenders ready to throw down for her. Unfazed, the First Prince hops onto the balcony railing like it's a park bench. He casually drops a bomb, telling her she's about to start private training. Flashing a bright smile, he says they'll begin as soon as she recovers because she can't survive being this weak. He then casually mentions that with her current cursed state, she'd end up accidentally killing anyone she marries. The next day, her maid tries to feed her a bite of food, but Leona stubbornly refuses. The maid treats her like a literal toddler, insisting she needs to eat because she's recovering from a serious illness. Leona waves her off, stubbornly claiming she's completely fine now. The maid goes into full mom mode, demanding she open her mouth and follow the priest's resting orders. Staring out the window, Leona realizes she needs to dig into the past to find traces of her real mother in this body. Pushing the plate away, she decides to just rip the band-aid off. She looks dead at the maid and bluntly asks where her mom is. The maid absolutely freezes, completely caught off guard by the heavy question. That night, Leona sneaks out in a cloak, noting that it's been 10 days since her big fight and Cage still hasn't visited her. She finds Cage on the balcony and tells him she needs to go somewhere secret. Cage looks hesitant and suggests waking the others, but she insists on a solo mission. She calls him out for blatantly avoiding her ever since he took that brutal beating. Cage looks down with a heavy heart, explaining the painful, inevitable sacrifices of being a soul summoner. They arrive at the Dandelion Palace, and Leona stares nervously at the imposing doors of the personnel room. Cage stops in his tracks, telling her he has to wait outside. He explains that the magical barrier on the door only lets blood relatives pass through. Leona touches the barrier, totally mind-blown by how insanely complex and advanced the magic is. Inside, she reads her mother's old diary, trying to understand the crushing pain of giving up everything. She finds a dark entry from October 421, where her mother realized the pregnancy was literally making her sick. Sitting alone in the massive room, Leona realizes the horrifying truth: the original baby's soul might have actually died. She grips the book, realizing the baby's soul was completely empty because her mother resented the pregnancy. A tragic memory echoes in the room as her mother tearfully apologizes, whispering that she didn't actually mean she didn't want her baby. A tragic memory flashes, showing her mother gripping her dress in despair among shattered magical artifacts, desperately begging for her baby to come back. Leona realizes the painful truth: if her mother had just viewed the child as a gift, the original soul wouldn't have slipped away. Clutching her own chest, Leona reads her mother's heartbreaking apology, feeling an intense physical ache in her heart. Unable to handle the heavy emotions, she quickly flips the page to read something else. The diary shifts tone, mentioning a desperate search for something that could save the baby. But the very next page painfully admits that a cure is completely impossible. She reads about her mother's first risky attempt to revive her. A memory of her mother, Esperida Aslan, surfaces, warmly asking to simply be called Ease. The diary then speaks directly to Leona, accurately guessing she opened it to find out why her reincarnated soul entered this specific body. The words hit like a truck as the diary officially claims Leona as her true, beloved child. Leona totally breaks down, huge tears welling up as she reads her mother's final wish for her to just be happy. Staring up at a grand portrait, she acknowledges her mother was an absolute legend for sacrificing her life, but admits she can't fully praise that choice. Gently touching the painting, she whispers that her mother's life was incredibly precious too. Looking up with renewed resolve, she promises to live a truly happy life. She smiles brightly through the tears, fully accepting the second chance her mother left behind. Meanwhile, right outside the massive doors, Cage stands guard. He reaches for the handle to eavesdrop but hesitates, blocked by the glowing magical barrier. Suddenly, Leona bursts out of the room, immediately asking if he got hurt. Flashing a bright thumbs up, Cage grins and assures her he's feeling perfectly fine now. But Leona squints at him, totally confused by his weirdly plain outfit. Cage quickly deflects, noticing her red eyes and asking if she was crying, which she completely denies. Panicking, Cage instantly draws his sword to look for an assassin, but Leona excitedly waves her mom's diary and custom cloak to calm him down. He awkwardly sheathes his blade, apologizing for jumping the gun. Leona whips around, completely flabbergasted, demanding to know if Cage actually knew her mom. Cage casually shrugs, saying he never brought it up because she literally never asked. Facepalming so hard, she sighs and asks what kind of person her mother actually was. Cage looks off into the distance, stating she was incredibly famous. As an absolute bruiser, Leona is shook, unable to believe her sweet mom was a notorious brawler. Instantly hooked, she eagerly demands to know how a specific fight ended and who took the W. Cage sighs, admitting it was a draw, before curiously asking what the diary actually said. Kneeling down, he earnestly promises that they all love her and he will always be her absolute shield. Suddenly, the Emperor looms in the doorway, and Leona casually asks what he's doing here. Glaring at Cage, the Emperor coldly reminds them that he is the one who brought her to this hidden palace. Staring her down, he demands an answer as to why she sneaked in here. Leona glances around, sensing the heavy, awkward tension in the air. She easily agrees to head back, and the Emperor sharply turns on his heel. Cage mutters under his breath, annoyed by the Emperor's overbearing attitude. Leona happily pokes the Emperor's leg, teasing him for being so secretly worried about her. The Emperor completely short-circuits, coughing awkwardly to hide his embarrassment while Cage glares from behind. Trying to regain control, the Emperor scolds her for wandering the dangerous palace like she owns the place. He reminds her of the crazy first prince asking for her hand in marriage, stating she'd be stuck right now if he hadn't stepped in to fight him. At the mere mention of the first prince, the Emperor's expression turns ice cold. Leona grabs his cape, trembling slightly from the intense, suffocating aura. The Emperor turns back, dead serious, and asks if she actually wants to become the Empress. She looks at him like he just asked the dumbest question ever, wondering why he's stating the obvious. Smiling smugly, she admits she's absolutely furious that some creep asked a 3-year-old for marriage and kids. In the background, Jiro's completely loses his mind, screaming about the first prince being a crazy bastard. Jiro's grabs Cage, trying to talk sense into him, warning that they absolutely cannot defeat the first prince right now. With a dark expression, Jiro's warns that rushing in blindly will just end in a repeat of their last massive failure. But Cage completely ignores him, sprinting off like a madman as Jiro's frantically yells for him to stop. Cage looks dead serious, suggesting they deal as much damage as humanly possible. Leona wanders into a massive room, her jaw dropping as she wonders if it's a storage vault. She completely geeks out, realizing the room is packed to the brim with priceless ancient artifacts. But the Emperor ruins the fun, holding up 3 fingers and setting a strict limit. Leona immediately crosses her arms, annoyed that she can't just loot the whole place. She stretches her tiny arms wide, demanding a bigger cut, but he shuts it down instantly. The Emperor stands his ground like a brick wall, proving he is ridiculously stubborn. Knowing she can't win, she dives into the gold pile, figuring 3 legendary items are still a massive W. First up, she snags a shiny bracelet specifically designed to block holy magic and protect Cage. Digging deeper, she pulls out a fancy magical ring used for teleportation. She waves it around excitedly, hyped that she can finally sneak away to her secret spot. The Emperor watches her intently, totally convinced her dragon blood is helping her sniff out the strongest gear. He mentally tries to predict her final pick, wondering if she'll grab healing or an offensive blizzard spell. Instead, she holds up a super basic gaudy red necklace, leaving him completely baffled. He realizes it's a nearly useless item that just distorts space and grabs attention, wondering why she wasted a pick. Catching his confused stare, Leona shoots him a smug, knowing little smirk. The Emperor glares, warning the tiny troll not to test his patience. Later that night, Leona absolutely faceplints onto her massive bed, totally exhausted. She groans about being out all day, ready to just pass out and sleep forever. Suddenly, her maid Lin looms over her like a sleep paralysis demon, asking if she enjoyed her secret trip. Leona nervously looks up, realizing she is in massive trouble. She tries to play it cool, insisting she took perfectly good care of herself. But Lin unleashes an endless barrage of nagging, absolutely chewing her out for sneaking off while sick. Mid-lecture, Lin notices the strange, high-quality cloak Leona is wearing. She instantly bursts into tears, pulling Leona into a tight hug and blaming herself for letting the princess wander alone. Leona gently hugs her back, explaining she didn't visit her mother's room out of loneliness. She assures Lin that she was just curious about her roots and tells her to stop blaming herself. Lin looks incredibly touched, but Leona suddenly snaps back into gremlin mode to change the subject. Cut to Jiro's, looking completely wrecked on the floor, officially ending his shift and bidding her goodnight. The next morning, Leona wakes up with a massive stretch, surrounded by bright sunflowers. She whispers about how lucky she is in this life, completely confusing a healed-up Jiro's. Getting straight to business, she points a tiny finger and questions if he's actually capable of training her. Jiro's beams with confidence, swearing she can absolutely count on him. He proudly flexes his heavily bandaged arm, claiming it's a scar from an honorable battle. The Emperor, standing nearby, looks completely unamused by his dramatic nonsense. He tells a battered Harriet to take a walk, and Leona just glares at all the adults acting like children. Jiro's drops to his knees, literally clapping for the Emperor's sarcasm while Leona yells at him to focus. Jiro's finally gets serious, noticing she looks sick and instantly casts a healing spell on her. He carefully checks her condition, letting out a sigh of relief when she confirms the pain is gone. He looks around, asking if this is the exact spot the first prince completely wrecked her. He freaks out, trying to understand how she even survived a brutal brawl in this training hall. Jiro's flashes a curious smirk, eager to know exactly how the fight went down. Suddenly, the Emperor walks in, wondering what on earth they're doing. He crosses his arms, sternly demanding to know where his daughter ran off to. Cut to Leona sitting peacefully in a lush, breezy field, ready to begin her secret training. She closes her eyes, focusing her mana and hoping it doesn't hurt this time. She mutters about wishing she brought more of the Red Sea power, frustrated that she can't fully control it yet. Suddenly, her eyes snap open in pure panic as she realizes she's been meditating for 7 whole days. Meanwhile, the blonde fourth prince gazes out a window, gloomily noting that his little rabbit has been missing for a week. He looks genuinely stressed, praying that she makes it back in one piece. The fourth prince completely loses his cool, screaming at his older brother to stop acting like a total psycho. But the first prince just traps him in a suffocating hug, leaving the younger prince completely paralyzed with fear. The first prince flashes a chilling smile, brushing off the harsh words like they're nothing. Terrified, the fourth prince quickly apologizes, and the older brother casually pats his head, teasing him for folding so fast. But his smile fades into a dead serious glare. He casually mentions that next time he returns, he might just have to kill a certain someone himself. He drops Leona's name, causing the fourth prince's eyes to widen in pure shock. Suddenly, the first prince violently grabs him by the collar, questioning if he'd really betray his own blood for her. Trembling but standing his ground, the fourth prince fiercely defends Leona. Cut to Leona, cheerfully talking about wanting to meet a certain someone again. But her mood instantly crashes when she realizes she's been stuck in training for a whole week. She absolutely panics, holding her head as she realizes everyone in the palace must be freaking out. Suddenly, a blonde man approaches, wearing an expensive military uniform and a charming smile. He gently checks on her, while Leona internally wonders if she actually missed this guy. Jiro's, her purple-haired magic teacher, glares at the blonde stranger, clearly not trusting him. Jiro's tells Leona they need to head back immediately because an entire search party is waiting. He nervously admits that if they're any later, the Emperor might literally declare war on the Tower of Demons. Leona scoffs, doubting her dad is that unhinged, but Jiro sweats, knowing the Emperor is absolutely built like that. The blonde man looks stunned, realizing the Emperor would go to such extremes for a kid. Stepping forward, the man formally bows and introduces himself as Lako's Carol, the King of Carol. Leona just gives him a deadpan glare, bluntly calling him a psycho. Jiro smirks mischievously, deciding it's the perfect time to crush the king's ego. He looks at Leona, expecting her to back him up. Instead, Leona completely throws Jiro's under the bus, pointing at the king and declaring he's way more handsome. King Carol smirks, his ego getting a massive boost from the tiny princess. But internally, Leona's eyes go cold. She realizes she didn't miss him. Her heart was just racing because she wants to absolutely destroy him. Jiro's looks confused, asking what kind of weird history she has with King Carol. Leona squints, noting that the king is way too quick-witted to mess with right now. Later, Jiro's and Leona chill in a grassy field. Jiro's casually calls her out for clearly lying earlier. Leona just flashes a fake, innocent smile to dodge the question. Jiro sighs, running a hand through his hair and deciding to just drop it. Still, he can't shake the feeling of being incredibly annoyed. He casually jokes that he should have just blown the place up, making Leona's sweat drop at his chaotic energy. Cutaway to King Carol in his dark office, while Leona internally roasts him, saying he looks like stupid moss. The king slams his fist on his desk, apparently still fuming over the whole who is more handsome debate. He sits alone in the gloomy room, frustrated by the teleportation magic that slipped right past him. Back in the field, a bright green magic circle lights up the area. Jiro stretches, announcing that it's finally time for them to head back. Leona rubs her chest, wincing as the lingering pain from her training flares up. She tries to play it off with a totally forced smile. Jiro's glares down at her, visibly annoyed by her stubborn refusal to act like a normal kid. He calmly explains that he deliberately swerved his spatial magic to get them as far away as possible. Leona looks shocked, asking how the heck he ended up in the dangerous forest of monsters. Jiro shrugs, saying he just needed a secluded spot to train his mana in peace. Leona chuckles, teasingly calling him useful, which he graciously accepts. But then Jiro's drops a massive blackmail bomb, threatening to tell the Emperor about her little secret meeting with King Carol. He smirks like a supervillain, asking what she's going to do now. Leona plops down in the grass, aggressively pouting and mumbling that he's not even that good-looking anyway. They finally arrive in a bustling town, and Jiro's cheerfully notes that their disguises are working perfectly. Leona squints at him suspiciously, deciding to save her own interrogations for later so she doesn't push him too far. Jiro's and Leona stroll through a lively market, with Jiro's totally dodging her questions. He suddenly presents her with a stunning necklace made from a dark djinn's tears. Leona glares at him, asking if he seriously thinks a shiny rock will make her spill her secrets. Jiro's just smiles to himself, mistakenly believing this tiny toddler is going to be easy to control. A magical flashback begins, revealing a different side to Jiro's cocky attitude. He admits he felt infinitely small growing up next to his absolute genius of a little brother. Even though Jiro's grinded and reached a high magical level, he eventually hit a massive wall, realizing his magic was just a grain of dust compared to true, overwhelming power. Back in the present, Jiro says something totally out of pocket, making Leona instantly furious. She clenches her tiny fist, absolutely fuming. She mentally vows to make this smug mage pay for his disrespect. After returning to the palace, Leona completely ignores him and sprints right past. Jiro's cries comical tears as she violently shoves his face away like a total nuisance. She runs straight to the Emperor, throwing her arms wide open and shouting for her dad. Flashing an angelic smile, she acts like the perfect, innocent daughter who just missed him. The Emperor gently inspects her, relieved to find not a single scratch on her tiny body. Without looking back, he coldly orders Jiro's to be put under strict surveillance for a whole week. The Emperor dismisses the mage, clutching his royal scepter with a deadly glare. Later, Leona slams her tiny fists on the table, completely frustrated. She realizes she desperately needs to level up her power to unlock the secrets of her mom's diary. Back in her room, she wonders where Jiro's ran off to, while Cage guesses the mage probably just bolted to escape the Emperor. Changing the subject, Cage hands her a beautifully wrapped present to show his loyalty. Leona struggles to hold the massive box, totally shocked by how insanely heavy it is. Heading outside with Cage, she bumps into the blonde fourth prince. Her eyes go wide as she notices his face is covered in fresh scratches and demands to know who he's been brawling with. The prince frantically waves his hands, awkwardly explaining it was just a rough magical training accident. He brushes off the injuries, beaming brightly because he's just thrilled to see her again. Leona sighs and reaches out, her hand glowing with gentle healing magic. The prince gets completely teary-eyed, deeply moved that his little rabbit actually healed him. Hype levels off the charts, he literally sprints away to brag about it to Harriet. Leona rolls her eyes, knowing this is just going to start another petty palace rivalry. Cage nods in agreement, wanting to avoid any unnecessary gossip. Leona complains about her packed schedule, whining that she barely has time to study with all this intense magic training. Suddenly, a bald, mustached guy named Alf Wolfagen steps into the scene, looking totally unbothered. He scoffs at the door, completely doubting that a 3-year-old can even read. He formally introduces himself as the fourth wise from the Ivory Tower. Leona just stares at him blankly while the adults assume she's intimidated. In reality, she's glaring at his shiny bald head, holding back an absolute roast. Alf flinches, instantly sensing her intense, judgmental aura. He tries to boast that a bald head is a symbol of immense wisdom, but Leona isn't buying a word of it. Sweating nervously, Alf grips his bag as the tension in the room gets super awkward. Leona mentally jokes that his head is so smooth, a fly would literally slip right off it. Trying to salvage his ego, Alf smirks, assuming she finally respects his vast intellect. He brags that everyone on the continent knows his famous name, but Leona is just completely lost. Trying to impress her, he dumps a stack of his own authored books right onto the table. He proudly displays his philosophical masterpieces, expecting her to be totally starstruck. But Leona effortlessly shuts him down, pointing out that the massive palace library is literally her playground. Alf's jaw hits the floor, absolutely staggered that this toddler recognizes his life's work. Instead of praising him, Leona picks up a book and bluntly calls the premise incredibly stupid. She completely wrecks his ego, savagely stating that his books failed because the titles sound like a total joke. Alf rummages through his bag, annoyed that the princess didn't read his books, promising to completely dial up the intensity. He slams down a massive autobiography, ordering her to read it. Leona just stares, fully convinced this guy is a total narcissist. Alf starts testing her on ancient lore, casually mentioning a historical figure who betrayed God. But Leona instantly fires back, easily debating the deep philosophical differences of the old masters. Alf looks like his brain just short-circuited, absolutely mind-blown that a 3-year-old knows this stuff. She drops even more obscure names and theories, leaving the so-called wise man sweating and slamming his bag in frustration. He nervously tries to defend his unproven theories, sweating as he admits they're still under study. Annoyed by his excuses, Leona pulls out a creepy chain-locked ancient book, challenging his supposed genius. Alf stammers, asking exactly what kind of cursed book she just slammed on the table. Flashing glowing red eyes, she stares him down and drops a terrifying hint: human skin. Alf recovers his ego, declaring that if she can decipher it, he'll quit his job and snitch directly to the Emperor. Cage sweats in the background while Leona complains she can't even focus because Alf's bald head is literally blinding her. Alf smirks, officially turning this into a high-stakes bet. Leona flashes a confident grin, giving him an okay sign and asking how much time she has to completely wreck his challenge. Alf nods, agreeing to lay down the terms. He leans over the table, setting the ultimate conditions for reading the book. If she succeeds, he promises to cough up a whopping 10,000 gold pieces. The book is written in an undeciphered demon language, but Leona internally laughs. She literally has demon blood running through her veins. Cage watches her walk away, and she announces she's heading straight to the library to get to work. At the massive doors, Cage stays behind, assuring her the magical barrier will keep her perfectly safe inside. She agrees and boldly pushes her way into the quiet room. Inside, she takes a deep breath, enjoying the comforting smell of old books as she gets ready to grind. Suddenly, Jiros pops up out of nowhere with a massive smile. Leona internally curses her terrible luck. He playfully claims the library is his second home, while she suspiciously asks how he even knew she was here. She gives him a deadpan glare, bluntly asking why he's crashing her study session. Jiros claims he's just here to read, and Leona explains she's stuck deciphering ancient symbols for homework. She flashes a greedy little smile, mentioning the 10,000 gold pieces on the line. Jiros is outraged that a grown man is bullying a toddler and offers to step on his arrogant nose. Leona gets distracted, internally admitting Jiros is undeniably handsome. She mentally compares him to King Lakos, deciding Jiros takes the absolute W in the looks department. Realizing the homework is in demon language, Jiros offers to go beat the guy up for real. Leona casually says that's fine, but wonders if assault is a bit of an overreaction. She cheerfully brushes it off, bragging that she's a total genius anyway. Jiros goes completely dark, realizing this tiny princess isn't lying, she can actually read the demon tongue. Without hesitation, he drops into a perfect 90-degree bow, desperately begging her to teach him. He looks at her with intense, desperate eyes, and Leona realizes he wants the power to save his dead brother. She flat out rejects him. Jiros presses his hands together, literally praying to a 3-year-old. She turns her back and calls him crazy, but he relentlessly chases her in circles. He hits her with the ultimate puppy dog eyes, but she hits him with a cold, hard no. They start aggressively bickering, with Jiros whining like a baby and Leona yelling at him to act his age. Crossing her arms, she puts her foot down, refusing to help him mess with life and death. She coldly states she will never teach him how to save a dead human. Jiros finally snaps, yelling that she only says that because she's lived a perfectly comfortable, privileged life. He accuses her of knowing absolutely nothing about real pain. Leona looks genuinely stunned by the outburst. Then, without hesitating, she delivers a brutal kick right to his shin. He yelps in pain. Furious, she screams at him not to assume anything about her past life, knowing she's suffered more than enough. Jiros looks miserable, admitting his brother didn't have a choice in his tragic fate either. Tears welling in her eyes, Leona glares at him, coldly declaring she has zero intention of understanding his excuses. Cut to the next day, Alf stares at some papers on his grand desk, absolutely flabbergasted. He slams his hands down, completely mind-blown by her translations. Leona just sits there rubbing her eyes, totally exhausted from pulling an all-nighter. She yawns, complaining that she got into a massive fight with that stupid Jiros and casually wishes him to go to hell. Alf stares at the translated papers, absolutely flabbergasted by her flawless work. Leona flashes a cheeky smile, reminding him not to forget his promise to the prince. The bald wise man realizes he just got totally played by a toddler. But he takes the L like a champ, sighing and promising to keep his word. He stares out the window, realizing he'll have to confront the mysterious first wise. Suddenly, Leona hits him with the ultimate puppy dog eyes. She claps her tiny hands together, completely catching him off guard. She happily demands her well-deserved reward for finishing the impossible homework. Meanwhile, the blonde fourth prince is getting completely wrecked in training, screaming that his brother is trying to kill him. The first prince just smirks, ruthlessly attacking his younger sibling without a second thought. He fires off a massive white magic arrow, sending the fourth prince sprawling to the ground. Standing over him, the first prince coldly states he's fully recovered his body. He grabs his brother by the throat, looking him dead in the eyes with absolute malice. He casually threatens to just end his life right there to save him from future pain. Out of nowhere, Leona steps onto the battlefield, calling the first prince a straight-up bastard. She doesn't hold back, charging up a massive flaming ball of destruction. But the first prince just laughs it off, easily crushing her spell like a fragile glass toy. He deflects the flaming debris, unfazed by her surprise attack. Flashing a creepy smile, he asks if she's finally gotten stronger. He instantly summons a barrage of giant floating boulders to crush her. Leona leaps out of the way just as the rocks smash into the ground, completely obliterating the courtyard. The first prince draws his sword, stepping through the dust cloud and warning her he won't go easy. But Leona just smirks confidently, effortlessly dodging his strikes and bragging she won't get hit twice. He immediately tests that theory, launching a massive fireball right at her back. She drops to the ground, dodging the blast with a perfectly timed evasive roll. Popping back up, she taunts him, declaring she's already figured out all his cheap tricks. The first prince halts, realizing she's actually using space distortion magic. Cage tries to jump in, but Leona summons a ball of fire, telling him to stay out of it. She cranks the heat to the max, summoning a terrifying giant lava skull monster. Following it up, she unleashes a brutal blood explosion right at his face. The prince's aide watches in awe, finally realizing why Leona chose that specific space-distorting artifact earlier. Despite getting blasted, the first prince actually cracks a genuine smile. His aide is completely stunned, asking if he's actually enjoying this crazy fight. The aide completely geeks out over Leona's overwhelming power, while the prince tells him to chill. Snapping back to business, the aide hands over a sealed letter. He explains it's a friendly visitation request from the King of Carol. But the first prince doesn't care, instantly incinerating the letter in his hand. Back to the brawl, the first prince swiftly pins Leona's tiny foot, stopping her in her tracks. Totally defeated, she dramatically flops onto the ground like a starfish and tells him to just kill her. She glares up at him, loudly questioning why every guy here is an absolute psycho. The first prince stands over her, casually pointing out that since she isn't fully human, beating her to death isn't exactly easy. He tells her to chill, explaining that pinning her down was enough to claim the W. He stares at her intensely, knowing she's completely out of moves. He holds out his hand, ordering her to obey him if she wants to avoid another beatdown. Leona cheekily agrees to be his follower, noting she's not his first minion. She officially dubs herself follower number 100, much to his confusion. Shaking his hand, she promises to go out and recruit 97 more lackeys just to fill the roster. But then the first prince completely derails the moment by casually asking her to marry him. Leona recoils in pure, unfiltered disgust. Suddenly, the fourth prince shoots up in bed, screaming Leona's name in a blind panic. Sweating and terrified, he feels a gentle hand on his head, bringing him back to reality. Back with the fourth prince, Leona stares him down, asking if his intense fever has finally broken. The prince shoots up in bed, absolutely dumbfounded that they both actually survived the brutal ordeal. Leona crosses her arms like a boss, smugly explaining that her guardian angel is just way crazier than his attackers. He completely freaks out when he spots the first prince casually napping in a chair nearby, while Leona sighs that the guy just refused to leave. The blonde prince frantically grabs her shoulders, desperately asking if she really defeated Roderick all by herself. When she nods, he pulls her into a massive bear hug, crying and calling her the absolute best sister ever. Leona gasps for air, demanding he let go before he literally chokes her out. Slipping right into leader mode, she fiercely scolds him for getting beaten up so easily, asking if he actually has a death wish. The prince blushes furiously, admitting he was just way too embarrassed to ask his tiny sister for help. Leona firmly reminds him that there's no room for embarrassment because they are family. She lays down the law, declaring it's only natural for a leader to protect their own subordinates. Hearing the word family completely shatters his emotional defenses. He bursts into a ridiculous waterfall of tears, while Leona awkwardly panics and orders him to stop crying. He hugs her again, glowing with pure gratitude, while she just awkwardly accepts the overwhelming love. Later, Leona chills at a tea table with Cage, casually admitting she's completely drained from burning so much mana. Cage suddenly gets dead serious, staring her down to ask a heavy question. Before he can speak, they get interrupted by the Emperor's aide acting totally unhinged. The aide literally strikes a bunch of fabulous poses surrounded by glowing roses, hyping up how Harriet witnessed Leona completely wrecking the first prince. He gives a massive thumbs up, fanboying out of his mind, while Cage just awkwardly watches the bizarre spectacle. A flashback hits, showing the first prince looking icy and majestic as he notes their father showed up to the scene too. Leona snaps at him for randomly scooping her up earlier, demanding a warning next time. The first prince ignores her complaints, intensely demanding an answer to his own question. He presses her, asking if she grabbed that ancient artifact specifically because she planned to fight him all along. Sweating bullets, Leona spins a total lie, claiming she just wanted to learn about space distortion and snagged the item by pure coincidence. He warns her that if the nobles catch wind of her true power, the political game will instantly change forever. The aide chimes in, nervously reminding the prince that using such complex politics on a 3-year-old is pointless. Internally, Leona glares, completely insulted because she understood every single word perfectly. The first prince ponders the fact that he just got clapped by a toddler, wondering what the arrogant nobles will actually do now. The aide cries happy tears, completely ignoring the politics and just hyping up how amazing the princess is. But the first prince brutally drops her ego, reminding her she's currently the weakest of all her siblings. Leona instantly points at her squad, declaring she has Harriet and Cage to back her up. The aide grabs Cage in a hilarious chokehold of friendship, loudly promising to protect the princess until he drops dead. Leona looks back at the first prince, reminding him that just aiming for the throne isn't going to be enough. The first prince states that Roderick is already one of her followers, leaving Leona totally stunned. He looks over his shoulder, genuinely baffled that such a fierce warrior bent the knee to a toddler. Since Roderick is official follower number 100, they declare it's time to gather the other 97 minions to complete the roster. Leona grabs the blonde prince, proudly stating that he and Neki are already on the squad. She completely flexes, revealing that even the fourth wise from the ivory tower begged to be her student. The first prince's brain basically short-circuits trying to process an ancient sage serving a 3-year-old. Surrounded by glowing flowers, Leona crosses her tiny arms and asks if her lineup is impressive enough yet. The aide and Cage passionately swear to do their best, while Leona smiles with pure satisfaction. Back in the dark hallway, Cage carries her and finally brings up his serious question again. The vibe goes completely cold as he softly asks if her soul is actually different. Leona freezes like a deer in headlights, terrified that her biggest secret just got exposed. She tearfully confesses, admitting she kept quiet because she was afraid of being tossed away and unloved. Cage smiles warmly, gently asking her to just trust him. He hugs her tightly, promising to stay by her side no matter what she truly is. Testing his loyalty, she asks what he'd do if she was actually an evil witch, but he calmly states she's just his princess and nothing else matters. A tragic flashback transports us to a gloomy, ancient city as Leona remembers her past life. We see her as a young witch, looking completely heartbroken as she admits her own parents abandoned her. The Emperor holds Leona tight, telling her that everyone in the palace is super proud of her. But then his aura turns pitch black as he furiously demands to know how Zeros found out her secret. Leona just stares at him, wondering why he completely loses his chill whenever Zeros is mentioned. Later, Leona checks her jam-packed visitor list, noticing a guy named Nickel booked multiple time slots. Suddenly, Nickel bounds into the room, totally fanboying over her for wrecking Roderick in combat. Leona proudly claims her victory and her maid Lynn smiles, saying the news is a huge relief. Lynn pulls her into a warm hug, begging the tiny princess to just stay safe and grow up happily. Meanwhile, Leona tells Cage they need to meet Alf before heading to the library. Out in the hall, the Emperor physically blocks Zeros, while Leona glares daggers at the mage for showing up uninvited. The Emperor coldly announces that the Tower Master is officially banned from stepping foot in the palace. Alf the bald wise man awkwardly shows up, sweating bullets and muttering that he'll just try again tomorrow. But before he can dip, a group of nobles instantly recognizes the legendary Fourth Wise. The nobles completely fanboy over him, but Alf drops a massive bomb. He boldly declares he's actually a student of the 12th princess. The noble's jaws drop to the floor, absolutely stunned that a literal toddler is tutoring a genius. Alf just closes his eyes and nods smugly, soaking up all the clout. He fiercely warns the nobles that if anyone talks trash about the princess, they'll have to deal with him. Watching this, Zeros looks down with deep regret, kicking himself for judging Leona so harshly in the past. Later in the library, Leona crosses her arms and actually apologizes to Zeros for screaming at him earlier. Zeros blushes hard, completely caught off guard by the tiny apology. But she immediately brushes him off, spinning around and stating she has way more important stuff to do anyway. Zeros panics, loudly stressing that Cage somehow discovered his biggest secret. He looks totally defeated, admitting the secret just slipped right off his tongue by accident. Leona squints at him suspiciously, asking if he's still planning to side with King Carol. Zeros gets dead serious, warning the little princess that she really needs to watch her back. Annoyed by his hovering, Leona grits her teeth and bluntly asks if he wants another punch to the face. Zeros bursts out laughing, brushing it off as a joke while Leona literally winds up a tiny punch. Trying to change the subject, Zeros asks if she's wearing the special shoes he gifted her. Suddenly, the scene shifts to the Emperor looking like an absolute raid boss, demanding an answer. The Emperor glares intensely at a sweating Alf, demanding to know why he can't permanently ban the Tower Master. Cut back to Leona standing proudly in a bright green sunflower dress, stating she wears whatever she wants. She then turns to Alf and ruthlessly roasts him, saying he'd actually look young if he wasn't completely bald. Alf absolutely loses his mind, screaming that he's going to file a formal complaint over the hair loss mockery. Leona just smirks like a menace, pointing out she was literally just stating facts. Meanwhile, Nickel aggressively argues that he was her follower way before Roderick ever was. The first prince steps in, glowing with a strange aura as he casually notes how much everyone has grown. Leona's eyes widen in shock as the first prince boldly calls out to everyone hiding in the shadows. Nickel quickly dips out the door, cheerfully promising to visit Leona again soon. Alf stands there sweating buckets, totally mind-blown by the chaotic royal drama unfolding right in front of him. He bows, promising to do his absolute best, but Leona just waves him off and tells him to hurry up and leave. Crossing her tiny arms, Leona sighs about everyone forcing their opinions on her. The first prince casually sits at a table, asking if she has thought about his shadowy suggestion. Leona tilts her head, completely confused about what suggestion he's even talking about. Suddenly, a creepy voice echoes in her head, promising that they will be happy together. Sitting across from the first prince, Leona flat-out rejects whatever shady deal he's offering. He just smirks, confidently declaring that he is destined to become the emperor and the strongest being alive. Stopping at the grand doors, he glances back over his shoulder. He drops a cryptic warning, telling Leona to watch her back around someone named Sherry. Flashing an unsettling smile, he admits he really doesn't want to lose her. Later, her maid Lynn looks totally confused, noting that something really weird is going on in the palace. Lynn mentions that several people claim they saw the princess walking around today, but Leona freezes, knowing she was literally asleep the whole time. Leona looks back at Cage, quietly waiting for his thoughts. Meanwhile, the stuffy nobles are completely baffled, whispering that she's literally just a toddler. They wonder if the sage was trolling them, but suddenly the emperor slides into the scene with a massive, goofy smile. His smile drops instantly when he sees Cage chilling right next to his precious daughter, utterly shocked. He mutters that this isn't cute at all, ordering the guards to report anything strange immediately. Leaving the room, he bluntly states his harsh words are just the cold truth. Leona looks down at her tiny shoes, slowly piecing a puzzle together in her mind. Totally exhausted, she throws herself onto her massive bed, absolutely done with the day. Cage watches her flop, deciding it's best not to overthink the situation. Suddenly, she pushes her maid aside just as the blonde fourth prince nervously approaches with a bouquet of flowers. Leona deadpans, asking if he seriously brought those specifically for her. She brutally smacks the bouquet to the ground, calling the flowers a bunch of useless rags. She coldly tells him to back off and stay away from her. But the prince is completely delusional, ignoring her hatred and just thinking her chubby cheeks look absolutely adorable. Furious, Leona screams at him to take his trash and never show his face again. Suddenly, a creepy girl with dead eyes steps out of the shadows, threatening to drain Leona's strength and kill her. But Leona effortlessly catches her wrist, absolutely shocking the girl with her raw physical power. Later, at a family meeting, Leona slams her tiny hands on the desk, absolutely livid that someone dared to mess with her loyal followers. She realizes she burned through most of her mana trying to bait out the culprit. A flashback shows the creepy girl launching a barrage of magical missiles right at her. The fourth prince nervously asks Harriet if Leona is only mad because the sixth princess treated them like garbage. But Harriet is literally crying tears of joy, happily soaking in the absolute madness of Leona defending them. Cut to the sixth princess, Sherry, furiously pointing at Leona and screaming that she destroyed all her precious dolls. Leona stands her ground in her frilly dress, sarcastically asking who should really be mad here. Leona gets right in her face, completely roasting her for being too weak to protect her own followers. Sherry loses her patience, complaining that Leona only spams basic wind and fireball spells in a fight. Realizing playtime is over, Leona unleashes a terrifying dark aura, deciding to go all out even if it drains her. Someone notes that Leona has a weird talent for solving problems with sheer brute force. Sherry looks completely shaken as Leona mercifully offers to pretend the whole assassination attempt never happened. Leona flashes a smug grin, telling the older princess she should actually be saying thank you for sparing her life. Sherry screams that it's a lie, insisting Leona could never erase the dark magic her mother taught her. Leona just smirks and hits her with a perfect snap, asking if she wants to play the same deadly game. Shadows erupt around Leona as she coldly states that she has to be powerful to protect her squad. Internally, she thinks about how being weak makes her own mother a prime target in this cutthroat palace. Tears fall from Leona's eyes as she admits she hates seeing royal kids used as pawns to intimidate their families. The dark magic swirls around her as she confesses she just wanted to live peacefully with her mom. Leona aggressively grabs Sherry's hand, asking why she's suffering and drowning in this toxic drama all alone. The harsh truth finally shatters Sherry's defenses and she bursts into heavy sobs. Leona crosses her arms like a boss, with Zeros nodding behind her, declaring she's putting a stop to this cycle. She promises Sherry that she won't let the bad guys get away, swearing to protect her mother too. Gently touching the crying girl, Leona promises to give her the courage she needs. With big tearful eyes, Sherry asks if Leona really won't kill her mom even though she's weak. Zero starts cracking up at the drama, but Leona furiously tells him to shut his mouth. Sherry practically tackles Leona in a hug, and Leona awkwardly pats her, confirming she hates hurting people. Sherry sniffles and asks what happens if she tries to kill Leona again, and Leona smugly tells her she can try that later. Sherry wails uncontrollably while Leona awkwardly pats her back, telling her to stop crying so they can go see her mom. Leona looks at her with deep empathy, realizing how much Sherry loves her mother. Zero sighs that the crying is annoying, and Leona violently grabs his collar, completely wrecking his calm vibe. Zeros casually brushes it off, warning Leona she'll be an emotional mess if she keeps crying too. Looking down at the tiny princess, Zero smiles softly and notes that she's actually become a lot kinder lately.